What is doing? I hate doing it, but I'd like everyone to like, subscribe, share the content. Sharing is really important. If you like the content that I'm bringing you with the 3000 podcast, you want to help us grow, make sure you do all that stuff. Follow us on Instagram, like, subscribe, share, do all that good shit. Now to the episode.
3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by a DJ, recording artist. Are you an artist? T-Rek. Thanks for coming, man.
You can call me that. I never call myself that. So.
What would you call yourself?
A creative type.
Okay, there we go. T-Rek, thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you for having me. This is my, I just said before we started, I've been a podcast obsessive for well over 10 years now, and this is my first official being on someone's podcast. So
there you go. I'm honoured to have you on, man. So obviously you've been DJing and for a long time, and people know you for that, but also you do other things. So it's going to be cool to jump in and find out your musical journey. And you are the second guest in a row that I've had in here that both lived across the road from me at some stage, which is fucking
Oh, really?
The guy I had in yesterday, he actually lived the other house around the corner on that same block as you were living in. So
at the same time as we're talking about?
He's a lot younger. He's 28. But he was a kid when we were there.
Right,
so there you go. Small world.
That's bizarre, yeah.
Westbury Grove's where it's at.
Westbury Groves. Hi, Mum. That's where my mum lives now.
Still now, yeah.
And she'll probably watch this too. So.
Yeah, there you go. Shout out to all the people I lived in the cage with. That was a good time in the mid-2010s there. Anyway,
in the big house.
In the big house, in the cage house. All right, moving on. Let's talk about your journey, how you grew up and got involved in music, man.
How I got involved in music? It was as simple as, I think it was the start of year, I can never remember if it's year 9 or 10, but a friend of mine at school, you get to choose your electives at school, and I was going to do photography because my mum was into photography and her sort of long-term sort of boyfriend when I was growing up was. And my friend said, didn't you always want to play drums? I'm going to do guitar. And I was like, all right, I want to hang out with you. So
Was it an artistic school?
It was a bit, yeah. It was quite an alternative school. It's not there anymore in the area that we're talking about down in...
Oh, yep.
It was called Ardok Windsor Secondary College when I went there.
I do remember that now. It's just a residential area.
A part of it is... How old are you? So I didn't touch it.
42.
42. Yeah, I'm 48. So... but yeah, just, the Ardok Village thing.
Village there, yep.
So it was, before I got there, it was Ardok High School and Windsor Tech, which was down back in the Avenue. Mm-hmm. And then they amalgamated, and so you walk between the campuses for different classes. So yeah, it was a bit of an alternative school. It was like they had an English language centre attached to it. There was a lot of homeless kids went there. You called the teachers by their first names, all pretty wild stuff for 1990 or whatever it was. So yeah, anyway, I just started sort of learning drums and a bit of guitar in music classes, and I was a skateboarder at the time. I was pretty heavily into the skateboard scene with it was like probably about the lowest tier skateboard rider for something called Snake Pit Streetwear, which is where it was like Jason Ellis and the Pappas Brothers and stuff. You're off camera. Oh, here we go. Is that a hardcore board?
Yeah,
oh, there we go.
Look at the
It's not. Is it a Snake Pit? There you go. I wondered, as I said it, I wondered if you'd know what I was talking about.
Yeah, for sure,
camera?
man, for sure.
Snake Pit.
And the Snake Pit's back now in a different...
No way. Really?
Yeah. So I think just on Melbourne...
What board is this, though?
That's a Spittle. So he is from New Zealand.
Oh, Lee Ralph.
Yeah, there's...
And what was the other big New Zealand guy? Gregor Rankin,
yeah,
who ran
man.
Snake Pit Street. Yeah.
So, but now I believe...
Surf dive and ski sticker too.
And I've had a few people in, and they said that surf dive sticker was only given to team riders. So whoever's board that actually was a surf dive team rider.
Veriflex rails. This is all the stuff that was just on the way out when I started.
Yeah.
I mean, I started on these boards, and within a couple of years, they went to... the double-ended sort of things that everyone still rides. It's funny, like...
The popsicle boards, like, yeah.
Yeah, but the evolution was, like, so much through the 80s, and then around 1990 or something like that, it all just went... And it hasn't changed since,
No.
It's like they figured out the formula. It's like a Fender tube amp. It's like, yeah, it doesn't get any better than that one.
That's it. Well, you think of Technics 1200s, man.
Hey, there you go. There's another one, yeah.
Yeah, they just... Once they find something that works, you stick with it.
Exactly, yeah.
But, yeah, that shop has reopened on Malvern Road, and I believe it might... and I believe it might be the Globe people behind it. I'm not sure.
It probably would be because Gary Valentine, who used to work in the shop, and his original board was on a Veriflex as well.
That was the first ever skateboard I had with the streets. It was like had the cop car and the street.
Gary Valentine?
Yeah, that was the first board I ever had as a real skateboard.
How old were you when you were skating then?
I was about 8, so I'd go down to, I think how old are you in grade 1? So I started skating grade 1 and we'd go to Paran.
Yeah, right.
Because those guys would have that shop at the South Melbourne Market where they would sell all the old boards and everything. So I bought a Gary Valentine off them.
Oh, so it was an old board then?
It was new, but they would sell... Yeah, and I believe that might have even been the Hill brothers.
Right, yeah, Stephen and Peter Hill, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think.
Do you remember the book they did?
Yeah. But I was so young then. Like the South Melbourne Market was just my local market, and I think I was grade 1, so I was probably 6 or 7.
Okay, so we're talking this. So you're, what did you say, 42?
42.
I'm 48, so there's 6 years between us, but we're talking about the same thing. You're 6 or 8, I'm like 12, 13, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd go, my mum would take me down to the Paran Bowl, which obviously was just
you remember Cheapskates?
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. I was young, man. But yeah, I think it's back. I think Snake Pit's back.
That's wild. That's really wild. I didn't think Snake Pit had ever come back.
It's on the same block, but around the corner, I believe. I haven't been there. My mate, DJ Boomerang, he came the other day, gave me a sticker from there, which the old logo and everything.
Wow, that's so cool. I'd love to go and get myself. I've actually still got my old Team Rider shirt, which is...
Do you?
Yeah, but I cut the sleeves off it at some point and it's like shredded from grip tape. And it's also like, I can't believe I used to fit into that. Like, like, it would look like a crop top now if I put it on. So, but yeah, I've never thrown it out. There we go.
So you started skating, you started playing drums, you started, getting
I was into
that formative teenage time.
Yeah, I just, I think when you're young, you're sort of trying to fit in. You want to be good at something. So no matter what I did, like skateboarding was my great love then. But there was always I didn't really have the balls to do big tricks. I was a street skater. I was kind of I had a smooth style, and I could do technical flat ground tricks. That was sort of my thing, which has been celebrated for a long time now. But in 1989, 90 was just it was Jason Ellis and the Pappas brothers just calling us all kinds of names because we were too soft to drop in or do anything on the big ramps. So it wasn't a very inspiring sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, environment. And then somebody dropped me behind a drum kit. I remember the first guy who was showing me a couple of beats, he's like, "Oh, you've done this before." I was like, "I've never played a musical instrument in my life." He's like, "No, come on, mate, you've done this before." I was like, "I haven't." And I could do it straight away. When you're at that age and you're, figuring out the world and girls and whatever else, and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Hey, you're really good at that." And it's kind of like, "Oh, I'm going to keep doing this," because with skateboarding, there was always 10 guys better than me. And I was always beating myself up for not being a good skateboarder. And at the same time, you're falling off and destroying your knees and spending all your money.
You're good enough to get a shop sponsorship.
I think it was more from being around, and because the things I could do, I could kind of make look smooth and okay. Mm-hmm. But I was, by the standards of those guys, I was really average. Look at the guys that came. They all went on to, Ellison and the Pappas brothers all beat Tony Hawk. I'm pretty sure all three of them beat Tony Hawk or placed higher than him at different stages. Yeah, so that's what I was up against. So.
But they're in a different league when it comes to that vert riding. Like that was something that was happening totally separate to the street skating movement, which was taken over.
Yeah. No, but I think my sponsorship was like a B grade endorsership. It was like, I think it was like 50% off everything, and you got the stickers and the shirts for free. But I really couldn't have been at a lower tier, but then still associated with something cool. So, but within like 2 weeks of playing drums, I was better than everyone in the whole school. So you can imagine, your little frail teenage ego kind of runs with that. So, and plus, you're sort of discovering, having your first tastes of, alcohol and weed and getting into chicks and rock and roll and all the rest of it. It just all seemed a lot more appealing and less physically damaging than skateboards. So skateboards sort of got the boot. I've still got one though, and I can still do. I can still ollie and do a front side 180 ollie, and then I can do that switch, and then I can do a shove it and that front side and back side shove it. That's my little 5 that I've always got to be able to have.
Okay. We should go for a skate down at Took DIY, man.
Oh man, I got back into it about 5 years ago, and I was actually going out at night, and I was surprised how much I picked back up. And it's funny, I would have been about your age now, and then I just sort of dropped it over COVID, and it's like I still feel physically fine for everything I want to do in my life, but all of a sudden I'm a bit scared to go back to it. It's like I just feel like even the difference between early 40s to late 40s, like it's going to hurt a lot more now.
Yeah, you just, as you get older, you just don't bounce back as much as you did when you were younger, where you would just literally pull yourself off the concrete. Now it's like,
Yeah. Well, I remember like I gotten back into it a bit. I was going for these late night skates. This is just before COVID. I used to work at a bar in the city. It was Pony, then it was Boney, now it's Cherry Bar. And I worked with a mate there, and sometimes I'd hang out for an hour afterwards. He'd close up the bar, and I'd drop him home. And so I went for a skate one night, and I was like, barrel it, like when you're going as fast as you can, somewhere up near the hospital there. And I hit there was a thing that didn't exist when we were kids, which is that, it looks like fresh bitumen, but it's soft so the tree roots can grow through it.
Yeah.
And you hit it, and it's like hitting marshmallows. So the board stops, and you keep going.
Yeah.
And I swear I rolled about 10 meters, like barrel rolled, and popped up at the other end and went, I'm all right. Like I did land on the leg, so I got a big bruise, but I was amazed that after 30 years almost of like barely skateboarding that I could take a tumble like that and pretty much be 100% all right.
yeah, that stuff, it's made out of recycled car tires. And it looks like
It feels like it.
Yeah, I remember first time I was skating down Ackland Street from like the Macca's end down to the Fitzroy end, and that's the first time I encountered that stuff. And I was going down past where that church is. I hit that thing, and then you just fly. Luckily, it's soft.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I only hit a small patch of it, so
then you've
the boards. Yeah, no, there was nothing soft about what I landed on. So
good times. So let's get on your musical journey. So then, you're playing in bands. Have you got a drum kit at home, or are you doing that at school?
I've never had a drum kit at home. My entire life, I've never lived anywhere I could do that. I taught myself largely by sitting on the edge of the bed and playing air drums. And of course, at school, it wasn't traditional, like it was an alternative school. So we were learning Beatles songs and whatever. And of course, you go straight to Pink Floyd, The Doors, Beatles, Stones, all the classic rock stuff, Doors. But at the same time, like through the skateboarding scene, grunge was just breaking. So Pearl Jam and Nirvana, and I already kind of had a nose in that American alternative music scene through the skateboarding and skateboard comps. Like, Nirvana's Bleach used to get played at skate comps, and Metallica Kill 'Em All, and a lot of those, excuse me, late '80s American hardcore sort of things. All of that was sort of happening at the same time. So I got into drums. Got really serious about that. I dropped out of school. I think I officially dropped out of school at the start of year 11, but I was barely going to school from about year 9, quite honestly.
Hanging out at the skate park or just whatever?
No, that was a music thing. So I did work experience at a music store that used to be, excuse me, down the bottom of Greville Street in Paran, just near Paran Station. It was called Drum City Music City. I did work experience there, and I loved it so much that I would just go in there and hang out. So I'd wag school and go to the shop. And I knew the guys, so they'd let me, I'd go out the back and just go up into this sort of rafter area and just like organize the guitar boxes and label them. And I was just so keen to be around music and stuff. And unlike most of the work experience kids who just sat there and read guitar magazines, waiting for someone to tell them to go get coffee. And because I showed initiative, at some point they went, we better give this kid a job because he's wagging school, turning up here working for no money.
Yeah.
So I was, fixing drum kits and working a bit on the floor and on the retail floor, and that was sort of the way in. And then when what was I going to say? Yeah, then Revolver. Most people know Revolver the club, but it was initially a music store.
Revolver
you probably
drums.
know that. Before that, actually, it was
Before that?
Yeah. Well, they always had drums. They started as it was a consignment music store, so it was only secondhand drum kits and guitar stuff. So people put it in there, sell it on consignment. I mean, they sold anything they sold new was like sticks and strings and skins and stuff. I started working there. I walked in there one day after a shift at KFC in Chapel Street. I was like 17, but living out of home, working in a pub.
And that KFC's just burnt down, hasn't it?
Yeah, above it has. So I think they're going to knock that down. So, I used to, back in the Paran Bowl days, used to go there as well. But, they just, it was a Saturday afternoon. I went in to buy guitar strings, and there was a guy working there who, it was the guy that got me the job at Drum City Music City. He said, we need someone to look after the band rehearsal studios out back. Can you come out and meet the owner of the building and the business? And I went out there, and 20 minutes later, I had a job 6 days a week running a studio at 17 years old, managing a bunch of 35-year-old musicians.
So, and man, look, obviously people know Revolver for what it is now, but explain to us that building back in the day. Was it residential? Was it commercial? Like, what was it then?
No, it had been fire damaged upstairs, and so a lot of it was a lot of that part around sort of or where the front of the club is, and up from there, that's where the fire damage was. It used to be an old arcade, so it sort of went all the way from Chapel Street to the back street. This is like over 100 years ago. So when I went in there, it was the music consignment store at the back. At the front on Chapel Street. Out the back was the rehearsal studios, which they were developing. So I think there was 3 when I started, and over that few years, we ended up building about 12 different rehearsal studios. Upstairs, where the nightclub is, where everyone spends most time, was a parachute factory. So there's this huge table about the size of the couches in there. And, because we go up and walk through there sometimes, and it'd just be people sitting along this table all sewing a big parachute at the same time. And what used to happen was, for that first couple of years, is we'd, have beers at rehearsal, because, all the guys who worked in the shop had bands that would rehearse at night in the studios.
Would they enter from the back or the front?
Well, you could it was all connected. So, yeah, if you're loading in your stuff, you come in through the back. But you could walk into the shop and, like if you knew the people in there, they'd come through. So it was a real thoroughfare, which you can imagine we had a lot of things stolen over time.
Sure, this is my guitar.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we used to sort of, well, not me so much, but, guys, be drunk and they'd say things like, we should kick out Parachute Factory and we'll build a pub up there and all our bands can play. And then one day it was like, they did it. It's like, yeah, we're building a club upstairs. It was like, what? And sure enough, they built the club and it opened in September of 97, the week that I turned 21. So I actually had, after drinks for my 21st birthday, was like, I think the first or second Saturday that Revolver the Club was open.
There you go.
This month, actually, it's January 2025. It's 30 years this month since I started working there.
Wow.
So, and I've always worked in that building in one way or another for 30 years.
Amazing. And now, in this day and age, as someone who's worked in, hospitality-ish scene for quite a while, I'm very interested in liquor licenses. To turn something that was a factory into something with basically a 24-hour license is something you wouldn't even comprehend in the city of Stonington anymore, but somehow they did it.
Yeah, I think that was a time where they were putting a few of those 24-hour licenses around. Well, not just Stonington, but in general. I think some of the other... Who else has got 24-hour licenses? I know, I was just talking.
There's not... Well, Lounge had one, I think.
I think Lounge had one. There's been a few places around.
They don't exist much anymore.
No, they don't. But there was a period in the 90s where they were going around a bit. But even Revolver's one came in late, actually, because the club didn't get that 24-hour license.
Greyhound might have had one.
Oh, did it? Okay.
I think, yeah.
But they didn't get that until it was around 2000 they got the 24-hour license. So we opened in 97. And I think for that first 3 years or so, it was like a 3 a.m. license. And then it got extended. So, but yeah, I don't think they do that much anymore.
I think you'd struggle to get a 3 a.m. I know people on Chapel that have a 1 that want to get it extended to 3, and I'm like, nah.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Even just across the road there, anyway.
Yeah, no, it's...
different game.
Yeah, different time.
So when you were working there, then you were just working in the rehearsal spaces, you were managing that, you were still making music. Had you started DJing at all?
No, I wasn't interested in DJing. I was very much doing drum stuff in bands. But what happened was a combination of as soon as I went and started making the first recordings in professional studios, which was at that time was Birdland, which was a famous studio that there was a guy called Lindsay Gravina that produced a lot of things like the big Spiderbait record. He did the first Living End record, Magic Dirt. List goes on forever. Used to be almost across the road from Revolver. Above the, the JB Hi-Fi is now?
Yep.
Like just up from there, there was a studio.
Building.
Yeah, another old building. So I went in there and did my first recording, and I was just really taken with the whole studio thing straight away, the big mixing desks and stuff. And I was like, I don't know what that stuff does, but I want in.
So you just had the practice, the rehearsal spaces. There wasn't a recording studio at Revolver.
Wasn't recording, no. It's just rehearsal for bands. I think they did a little recording studio later for a couple of years, but didn't really last. But yeah, I was just interested in that whole studio sort of thing straight away, and then went and got like a cassette 4-track set up, and then at the same time, Revolver, Revolver the retail thing at Revolver like expanded rapidly over those years. So they went from just consignment, just doing secondhand stuff, to doing new stock of everything. And then they sort of went from, just sort of focusing on guitars and having a few drums to like a full drum section. Then they opened the second side of the shop, and that became what that was at the time. It was called High Tech. So that was, it was the start of home hard disk recording and that kind of stuff. So early Pro Tools rigs and that kind of thing. And so there was a stock. So you were asking before, the stock used to come through the back of the place, and it would be in the stock room before it got processed and went out into the retail floor. And that stock room was actually the back of my office when I would be, managing the rehearsal studios at night. So I used to just get these boxes and just cut them open and be mixing desks and synthesizers or whatever, and just try to figure out how to use them. I had no background. I used to blow things up because I used to just plug things into other things. And I found like if you got mixing desks, you can plug a headphone output straight back into an input and it'll go for a while, and then it'll just go and like blow up. And I'd just kind of go whoops, and I'd like put the tape back on. And I'd remember I'd be walking around the shop like during the day, and I'd say, "We got another one of these mixing desks that like with because people then they'd sell it and it would come straight back." So they were constantly selling, and they never knew I was like blowing all this stuff. That's how I taught myself how to do electronic music. So I got interested in studio stuff, led into electronic music, and started listening to electronic music, buying records. But I just had no interest in DJing really until I played in a band that was some of the guys from Revolver, and they had a turntablist in the band.
Do you remember who it was?
Yes. Well, they had two. I didn't work with the first guy. The first guy they had was Boogs, who's kind of, one of the Revolver kings, and to this day one of my best mates and my favourite Australian DJ in the world. That doesn't make sense. So he was in it briefly, and then another guy called Acme, who hasn't really stayed out in the scene, so people may not know him so much, but he sort of joined, and I joined on drums. And I remember we were on a break, and I saw him sort of beat juggling, like cutting up a kick and a snare drum. And I was like, whatever that is, I want to learn how to do it, because it just looked, as a drummer, it looked more fun than just trying to program a beat.
And what year is this, like 2000-ish?
Yeah, it's around 98.
So
97, 98.
Because turntablism has a big, like, spike in popularity around that time.
Yeah, it did. I think that was as the invisible scratch pickles are popping off and all that kind of stuff. So I started messing around with turntables, and then at the same time, I think, the Punters Club that's just reopened.
Yep.
They used to do a thing, I think, on Saturday nights where they'd have the DJs that would play after the bands. It'd be Cram from Spiderbait, or Matt and Becky from the Mavises or something like that. And so I got one of those gigs. I played in a band that used to play at the Punters Club a lot with all those bands. It was called Berserk. And so I got a gig, it was Tarek from Berserk DJing, and it was just playing CD singles, not beat mixing or anything like that. Had no interest in DJing. And
playing rock music or playing whatever?
No, I was sort of playing, but at that time I was sort of getting into like sort of mainstream electronic music, which at that time, the Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and all that stuff was coming through, Propeller Heads, any sort of beat-driven stuff. I was really kind of anti-house and techno, so hip-hop, jungle, trip-hop, breakbeat stuff, anything that wasn't four on the floor. Mm-hmm. And so I remember going to doing this DJ set, and at the time I was like, kitchen handing for like $10 an hour and trying to make a living as a drummer, which is impossible still. And they paid me like $30 an hour, which was 3 times what I was getting paid to be in this dirty little kitchen washing dishes.
Plus free drinks.
Free drinks, got in for free, center of attention. All my friends are there playing my favorite music. And I'm like, hey, there could be something to this whole DJing thing. Like, because I was sort of like, like a snooty little, avant-garde musician. It's like, DJs aren't real music people, And I just sort of got interested in it and sort of dug further and found that, no, actually there is a very musical and interesting way to be a DJ, and a lot of DJs are some of the most interesting music people in the world. So.
Yeah. Well, like even just talking to Frenzy the other day, he said, look, I can play whatever kind of music, but I'll make it interesting, And
who was that, sorry?
Frenzy.
Oh, if I know him.
Anyway, he's been in Sydney for 25 years, but
that's probably why.
Yeah, that's probably why. But he just said, look, he can play any kind of music and he'll figure out a way to make it interesting. And I think that once you start attacking it with a different mindset, that changes the whole thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Break down for me back at the Punters Club in the late 90s. What the setup was.
I think there was probably turntables, but I didn't have any records. I had a small record collection, but not stuff that you would DJ with. And it would have been, I reckon it would have been just a couple of Technics turntables, God knows, some sort of, early proto mixer, those mixers that don't have an EQ or a gain on the channel kind of thing, just volume sliders. And then the old Denon, tray.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it were, rack mount. Wouldn't have been rack mounted though. It would have been sitting up there.
With the nudge button or the little dial.
But even that was like way beyond my comprehension at that point. So I used to make mixtapes with a 4-track machine and an old CD Discman from the 80s.
Yep.
And, adjust the tape speed on the track that I just recorded part of. And it'd go back. I would spend like a week to create like a little 15-minute mix that maybe had like 8 songs.
Yeah.
So I sort of reversed engineered everything. So I didn't have any money back then. So I couldn't buy turntables or anything really. So like.
But you had access to them at the shop?
Not really, because, it was just stuff would sort of be passing through. So, there was no turntables. Like we weren't selling turntables at the shop. So. But I liked it. Like my main sampler for the first 2 or 3 years of my electronic music production was like I was working on a 4-track. I had a DOD digital delay pedal, which had like about 1.5 seconds of sample time, and you could sample something and then kind of re-trigger it with the kick pedal thing. And so I would just sit there and like, play a kick pattern for like 10 minutes, and then I'd go to another track and do that with a snare. And you can imagine like it was like a CD Discman plugged into a guitar pedal. It's like it couldn't get more lo-fi really, and I'd do that and spend, half a day just to build like a 5-minute loop or something. And then just be so frustrated. You'd be into it at the time and you'd listen back days later, you'd put on something you're working on after you'd just been listening to the Chemical Brothers, and it was like, it just felt so many miles away from what I was trying to get.
Yep.
And it was just because, I didn't have the tools. It was funny, years later in COVID, I went and started digging up all of those 4-track tapes, and now all of that stuff sounds fantastic. It's just this endless library of stuff that I've built, so it's copyright free, and I've actually been sampling all of that stuff in stuff I'm doing now, But at the time, it was like, yeah, you do it and you'd have a great time, and then you put on a Chemical Brothers record and go, I'm never going to get... I'm so many hundreds of miles away from that.
If that's what you're striving towards, yeah.
Well, yeah, you're just running at stuff at that age, I guess, and with limited resources and whatever. But I'm so glad I had that, because it just makes you work so hard that then when everything became, free plugins on a piece, it was. I feel like it was only a few years between.
Technology ramped up quickly.
Yeah, like we'd have to spend $20,000 for like a Mac that could run a Pro Tools type thing or Logic or whatever. Between the software and the computer. And it felt like within 3 years you could just get, $1,000 PC tower and get some crack software off the internet and basically make, studio quality recordings. Like it was so quick.
Happened quickly.
Yeah.
So then do you go back to your Revolver family and say, look, I've been DJing here at the Punters Club, and because now Revolver is known for doing a lot of different styles of music, but predominantly more for the electronic music now. But then it was bands and it was different.
Yeah, initially it was very much the focus was on the band room as much as the DJs. The DJ stuff, it was more probably focused on the band stuff, but as you know, the nature of a band thing is like, well, you put on 3 bands and that sort of runs over a few hours and probably finishes around midnight, and this place is staying open until 3 a.m. or whatever, and so there's DJs before the bands and after the bands and all night in the other room. So I think gradually over the years the shift, the focus sort of shifted more, especially when the license went 24 hours and they started doing recovery. It became more known as a DJ venue, but initially it was really, it saw itself as competing with the SB and the Prince and whatever other venues, Punters Club and all that kind of stuff. Really,
yeah. The Duke was doing live music as well then, and that was the similar sort of band. Oh, the Duke of Windsor, yeah? Yeah,
they fired up a bit later, actually. The Duke was just there as a pub, and that was, somewhere around 2000 when they started doing stuff. That was my mate, Dave Powell, I think, who sort of ushered the music stuff back in there, and he was managing Jet at the time and sort of establishing that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's stories going around that there was one night where Jet played with like the Strokes or the Vines or someone. There was like 3 big that just played there where the stars aligned, but I can't quite remember.
It was probably that who's that Australian band that's very AC/DC like? Airborne, yeah. I know they used to play there. I remember like seeing them on a Tuesday night, like having a quiet drink at the bar, and the guitarist or something was like running up and down the bar with his wireless guitar. And I was sitting there with a friend having a drink going, that's never going to take off, And then like a year later they're on tour with Motorhead or something.
How funny is it that AC/DC sort of became a genre of music?
That's very true. I've never thought of that. It's well put.
It is. Well, when you've got other bands that obviously are so inspired by them, it's like What do they sound like? They sound like AC/DC. That's almost like a genre.
Yeah, I think Guns N' Roses are probably just behind them on that. I noticed that about 10 years ago when, guys were... See, I mean, we sort of grew up with Guns N' Roses, but 10 years ago it was like guys could be in their mid-20s and Guns N' Roses to them are probably like how we saw the Doors and the Beatles because it's that same time frame.
Yeah.
And I noticed a lot of bands that would be like, oh, right, you're like Guns N' Roses, but, you've got a short, fat guy with like as a singer instead. But the rest of the band, it was like, oh, okay, that's Slash and that's Duff and that's Steven Adler, right? So,
yeah, Appetite for Destruction was the first album I ever bought with my own money at 6 years old, man.
oh, there you go.
Because I was trying to get into the skating thing and the kids were listening to that and I'm like 80, 88 and I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And yeah, I've always loved the Gunners.
I love that we have the same cool cross references from the same time in the same area, but you were 6 and I was 12. I thought I was cool till I sat down here today. Sorry, people. He's the one that should be getting interviewed.
I was trying really hard. No, but I had some friends, older brothers and stuff that that I was looking up to and, that sort of thing, I never had any older brothers or sisters, so it was like, I would look up. But even though my dad wasn't that much older than me, he was like, he had AC/DC records and all that sort of stuff. I've since inherited his record collection. There's a lot of cool shit in there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes. That's always a place to find stuff. Yeah, I didn't have any older brothers or anything like that either. So my mum had great taste in music, but it was just not the stuff that's going to inspire you at that age. It was Billie Holiday and jazz and, Elton John and stuff. Which,
good stuff to sample from.
Oh, it's great. You find it later. But, when you're a 12-year-old sort of punk rock skate kid, it's like, Billy Joel's latest album ain't going to do it for you.
Yeah. So were you going into like Revel Records? Where were you going to buy your
records? I was.
I've
been shopping at Revel Records since I think about 1991, something like that. With Warwick and Steve, who passed away a few years ago. He was the other main guy in there with Warwick. So yeah, I've been shopping at Revel Records for better part of 35 years now.
Yes, wow.
Because that was just over the road as well from Drum City, Music City when I was working in Greville Street, and those guys were great too because occasionally I'd buy records and because I didn't have much money, so it's like CD was really an investment, and sometimes I'd be like I'd have enough to buy something new and it'd be like I don't know what I've bought all of the whatever band I was into records, like I'm waiting for something else to come out and somebody would go, oh, check out this band. I remember buying like a this might piss a few people off, but I bought a Tool record. I remember somebody recommended Tool, and I went home and listened to it, and I'm like, no, this is not my thing. So I went back, and they said, you want to swap it for something? I was like, yeah. And I'd seen this band that I wasn't entirely sure about when I saw them supporting Metallica. They're called Kyuss. Do you know Kyuss?
No.
They're a desert rock band. They went on to become Queens of the Stone Age, basically. I remember swapping. I was like, oh, I'll swap it for this Kyuss CD. I'd seen them... I think a little while beforehand, they opened for Metallica in Australia. I just remember it was a lot of wah-wah guitar and a lot of long hair. And I got their CD and fell in love with it. And then the same thing happened a couple of months later. I bought a Korn CD and it was like, this is not for me. And they said, what do you want to swap it for? I'm like, I guess I'll get the next Kyuss CD. And they became one of the biggest influences on me, Kyuss. So, the Greville Records guys are great. And now Warwick's kid, I don't know if he's one or two of his kids working there. So go to Greville Records. Still great.
Yeah, it is. And it's awesome to see that those, for lack of a better term, mum and pop record stores still exist.
Absolutely,
even on a small scale, there's not many left. So get out there and support those things. Yeah.
That's been a nice thing to see vinyl coming back in the DJ scene. I think over there in, what do we call that area? Well, sort of that Abbotsford strip all the way up to sort of Fitzroy. I think there's been quite a few record stores have opened.
Rick's Records open, the little Rick's Records there. You've got,
Yeah, there's all different ones.
But yeah, what really pisses me off, man, is like the vinyl resurgence. It's great. But then people go, record store day, look at what I went and bought from JB Hi-Fi. Like, that doesn't make sense. You're missing the fucking point. Don't post your records you bought from JB Hi-Fi or the records you bought online. You go into the independent record stores and that's where you buy them from. Yeah,
I guess so. The whole record store day thing, for people like us that have been buying records for, pleasure and a living for many years, it's a novelty that it's just like, well, because for some people it's like Mother's Day to me. It's like I don't really make a thing out of that with Mum. It's like, well, I'd go out to lunch with Mum every week. It's like rather than once a year.
But when it I totally agree. But when it supports independent stores, I'm all about it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a great thing for the stores. Yeah, it just doesn't interest me so much. But it's like that's great. You can all, support the store on that day, and I'll do the other 364 days a year.
Yeah, because some independent stores, that would be their biggest day of the year by a long way,
It would be, yeah. And I think that's probably why it was sort of started. I don't know. When did it kick off? I'd never heard of it till about 10 years ago.
Yeah, about 10 years ago in the US, I think. Yeah. But then now it's kind of the major labels have got onto it and they're putting out releases and they're trying to make the most of it. It's become, commercialized, even though that's kind of the point, but to an extent that
Any kind of growth area in the music industry that's going to benefit record stores or musicians in any way, I'm all for, even if it doesn't aesthetically interest or please me.
Yeah. So let's talk about your musical journey again. So you've started to buy more records. You've still, the rock thing is your main muse, the main direction you're going in. You're DJing a little bit more.
Yep.
Where does that sort of tick over to you think, man, DJing is sort of where it's at?
Sort of a gradual process. I think I had a band called Bizarre in the 90s, which I started in about 94 with a couple of guys. And we did okay. Like we got signed to a major label. We signed to Rubber Records, which is a Melbourne independent label that I'm still affiliated with. But they at the time were like a subsidiary. How do you say that word?
Yeah,
BMG.
I believe they put out the first 1200 record.
They did, and around that time I briefly managed the 1200 Techniques.
Did you really?
Well, at the behest of David Vodka, who runs Rubber Records, actually. It was a temporary thing. I think they had a manager that had screwed up a launch date for their first record at Revolver, and he's just sort of said, I think I was sort of running at different things in the industry. I was just trying to find something to make a living, that was more fun than dish pigging, washing dishes. So he said, can you just look after these guys till I find them a proper manager?
Did you know them already? I'm guessing you knew Peril.
No, I sat down with Peril. I'll never forget that. Can you take us to the next level, mate? Tarek, can you take us to the next level, mate? And I was like trying to explain to him, it's like, I'm just going to kind of make sure you guys get your gigs booked properly. I booked the launch for that first album at the Prince of Wales, actually. That was the only gig I booked for them.
Yep.
And by the time that happened, there was so much buzz on them that David Vodka had lined them up with... I get the Parisi brothers mixed up, Andrew or whichever Parisi brother does the management stuff. So it was literally one gig I booked for them.
Yep.
So Rubber signed them. But anyway, so Rubber Records, I was with them with Bizarre, and Bizarre folded at the start of 1999. And I think by that point, I was just sort of, doing a lot of electronic music production and sort of interested in DJing. But, back then it's like you needed turntables at home and you needed a record collection as well. Like all DJing was on vinyl. Like you remember, like it wasn't even even those crappy Denon CD players, you didn't get them at most gigs. So David offered me a publishing deal with Rubber Music, which was part of Sony Publishing, still is, and I'm still with that same deal. I just re-signed with them last week, 25 years later. And so I kind of did a bunch of demoing and basically gave David Vodka enough sort of belief in me that he was able to go and get me a little chunk of money as an advance from Sony Publishing. And I used that money. This is a bit like what we were talking about before. The thinking then, this is 2001, I think, it was $10,000. It's like most people at that point would spend that. That would about get you probably Pro Tools and a Mac that would run it, Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to buy a $1,000 PC, get crack software, and spend the rest of it on turntables and a mixer and a case for my records and, a few $100s worth of records and start DJing. And everyone in my life, like all my music friends, were like, dude, you're insane. You're like, this is such a great opportunity and you're blowing it, And I was like, no, I reckon there's something in this DJing that's going to kind of work out for me. And
so where'd you go buy the turntables from? Where'd you buy all
Factory Sound. Still my friends, and they're still awesome. Go to Factory Sound.
Fitzroy?
This is all I'm here to do. I'm just spruiking my friends' businesses. Go to Gravel Records.
Factory Sound's in South Melbourne.
That's it, yeah. They've just opened in Sydney as well. So
okay, yep, yeah, I know where they are. They're just near St. Ali Coffee. There, the original.
Yes,
yeah. Yep, Factory Sound. So you went there. You bought your 1200s.
Yep.
You bought your mixer. What mixer did you get?
I bought this silver Stanton mixer and the external Pioneer effects unit, and it just wasn't doing it for me. And I used it for about a month, and they very kindly let me take those two things back and exchanged it for the DJM Pioneer 600, which we're looking at off camera just over here, which I pointed out before.
Do you want to touch it?
Maybe later. Um, but that mixer changed my life because it was so creative. And I was watching, at this time I was getting interested in Boogs, the DJ, because I was really into the breakbeat scene with the DJ stuff, but it was starting to, it was when new school breaks were sort of coming out. So, you had your Plump DJs and Lee Coombs and all that stuff. And then there was the finger licking breaks. And all of a sudden the breakbeat scene it seemed to sort of split in half very quickly. It all got very sort of serious and chin strokey and kind of proggy, or the rest of it kind of went to like wacky, silly kind of, overly cheesy funk break sort of stuff. So I think I was sort of looking for something new to engage with. And Boogs at the time was sort of mashing up about 8 different styles of music. I mean, we think nothing now of, like, everything was so much more genre-based back then, everything's really mixed up now. But he was sort of, he was playing a bit of breaks and stuff. He was playing a lot of 80s 12-inches. This is all vinyl. The Electro Clash thing was starting to come through, that sort of 80s throwback. He was playing Detroit techno and Chicago house, disco edit records. And what was the other thing? Oh, a lot of sort of, mash-up bootleg stuff as well.
Which was very new.
That was very new. That was sort of coming, and it was quite connected to a lot of the Electro Clash sort of stuff. So he was sort of mixing all of that together in this way that would just made me actually like, 4/4 kick drum sort of music. I was saying before, I didn't like anything that had, as soon as I heard that disco beat, I was like, I'm out. But he really sort of pulled me into that headspace, and the way he was using the Pioneer mixer and utilizing the effects, and the way he was he would just sort of, mash 2 tracks together. A lot of his biggest moments where like everyone in Revolver would be, screaming and hands in the air, would actually less be just like a breakdown in a track. It was more the way he would kind of build his own breakdowns out of 2 tracks using the effects and stuff. So there'd be a breakdown, and when the track would drop back in, he'd actually flip the bass back in the other track. So he was really doing these live on the fly remixes, and they were the biggest parts of his set. And I thought that was amazing because that's like real musical stuff. It's like you're not just getting a reaction from a track that you're playing, like you're remixing a track live on vinyl too, which is terrifying because, as you know, one jump and the whole thing goes out the window. And so that really inspired me to kind of dig down in the DJing and, really sort of utilize the tools as something creative. I thought, I think I can be as creative, if not more so, than with a drum kit or a synthesizer or a guitar in my hands. So.
Yeah. And I guess now Pioneer is the industry standard, but then it really wasn't. It was kind of trying to push into that market. And I think the 600 is really what kind of pushed it into, that made it like most clubs were using that kind of mixer.
You're right. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. And at the same time, around the same year that came out, there was the 500 just before that, the blackface one. But that was the first one, I think, that really became an industry standard. But at the same time as that came out, they did the CDJ
500s.
1000s came out.
Remember the 500s?
I remember those, yeah.
And they had the spring-loaded...
Yes, I've got one at home, actually.
The 1000s became the industry standard very quickly.
They did, yeah. I don't think that many of the Mark 1s were in the country, but the Mark 2s were the first one. But I bought... That was part of my... another thing I spent with my publishing money when I was getting my turntables. I bought a CDJ because I saw DJ Ransom, who's another one of my number one favorite DJs to this day. He had a Pioneer endorsement, so they gave him one of the Mark 1s in a road case. Like everything I talk about, I can just see over here. He has all the toys behind me.
I've got a lot of crap now.
And I saw him. He started he'd bring his in a road case like that and take the lid off, and so he'd play mix his own tracks in that he was working on with his vinyl. Which to me as a producer, like who I'd already made 20 or 30 tracks at that point, was a revelation. So I bought one of those, and I used to literally turn up with a bag of records and a CDJ so I could play my own stuff.
So then you would just plug in your own CDJ, find a spot for it, put it next to the turntable, play records, and then play your own CDs. You weren't playing other people's music on the CD player that often.
Not, I did as well. I started at the same time, I started doing my own re-edits and bootlegs and things like that. So,
was Boogs sharing edits with you and stuff at this stage? A DJ community's going, look, this works. Have a go at this.
Fairly quickly, yeah. So, I mean, I was just a big Boogs fan for the first few years, and then, I was really taken with him and stuff, and he used to be really sort of smart-assy with me, and, I can imagine, like, I know, because, I mean, I've had it in my own life since then, but, when guys really sort of love what you do, and it's something, if they come up to you and, I was on all kinds of cocktails of God knows what back then, I would have been very earnest, And it's like if someone's approaching you, even if they're being nice and sort of complimenting, but if they're really, really serious, it's hard not to just take the piss out of them.
Yeah.
So he used to kind of, in a friendly way, sort of tease me a bit and stuff. I'd give him a CD of like, hey man, I heard your set last weekend and I went home and spent 2 days and made this record that inspired by your set from last weekend. And he'd like go, oh, thanks, another drink coaster, and put it down. But he was being funny. But at some point it flipped. I remember I did this Led Zeppelin bootleg, and I gave it to him. I used to give him tracks for ages. I'd never hear anything about it again. But I remember talking to a girlfriend, and she was at lounge, and she was saying, oh my God, you've got to hear this Led Zeppelin bootleg that Boogs is playing. It's absolutely like tearing the roof off the place, because she knew I was a rock fan. I was like, Led Zeppelin bootleg? I'm pretty sure that's the thing I gave him last weekend. And that was where he started actually playing my stuff, like where I'd finally got to a point where my productions were, you could give it to Melbourne's sort of best DJ and he could drop it in his set and it wouldn't sound rubbish.
Yep.
So, and then it sort of went from there. And then he very quickly became a huge supporter of mine, him and Spacey, and they started breaking my records for me in the clubs because I was a working DJ, but mainly bar gigs, or if I did a club gig, it was small crowds. But these guys were playing to packed rooms every week, so they really broke my tracks for me. And I became friends with them through that, and to this day, they're two of my actual best friends,
Amazing.
So, yeah.
So say, let's just use that as an example, that Led Zeppelin. How are you putting that bootleg together? Is that with your cracked Ableton or whatever you're using?
This is before Ableton existed even, actually. Oh, no, sorry, Ableton would have been out by then, but I wasn't using it. This was, I've always been in Cubase, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was all. I started in, there's a thing called Sonic Foundry Acid.
Yeah, I had that as well.
Yeah.
First early days, and then it got sold, and then they
Then it was
messed
Sony
it up.
Acid, and then it was something.
Acid Pro, yeah.
But I sort of missed a fairly important chunk in there, which is I was in a duo called Bionikworld from 2002 to 2004. It was me and another guy, and he was very technically minded, and we were both creative and worked on the music equally. Like he'd often start the tracks and do a lot of programming. And we had a live show. We'd go out with an MPC and all different stuff and play live. And when I started working with him, he was like, "No, you got to get off this acid. You got to get off the acid, mate. We got to get out of this acid software, like because it's cheap and shitty and."
And that was only on PC. That wasn't on Mac as well.
Yeah,
I remember.
that's right. Yeah.
Because when I became a Mac guy, I'm like, I use that, and I couldn't find it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was on PC for years, so I didn't have to do it for that. But he was like, we got to use Cubase. This is the industry standard for what we're doing. So he pulled me kicking and streaming into Cubase, and I remember thinking, I felt like finishing primary school and starting at high school or something. But within 3 weeks, it was like, oh yeah, this is makes sense. I can do everything. So everything to this day from then has been Cubase actually. So
it's most people find a DAW or DAW, whatever you want to call it, and they just stick with it. That becomes their one.
Yeah, I've had a lot of young guys for a lot of time now. Like always want to quiz me about, like what? Because there's a lot of things I do in my production which I think are just, end up sort of sounding quite different to a lot of other things. I'd like to think. Some people might go, you don't sound any different, mate. So I've had a lot of young guys for a lot of years. Like, oh man, what software are you using? Like, and I'm like, it's like asking me what blank canvas I bought. It's like,
doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, it matters, but you know what I'm saying. It's like it doesn't really creatively change things.
It's not the equipment, it's how you use it.
You keep telling yourself that, mate.
But yeah, it's like, it doesn't matter what you use, it's what you put into it. It's what
Absolutely,
I think people get hung up in what, like, people were making amazing music with a 808. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly,
so it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's about the creative ideas and stuff. But I also understand when you're young, it all just seems so overwhelmingly. It's just so many things, and I'm talking about just the music in general. Like you want to DJ and you want to make records and you want to buy stuff and you're trying to figure it all out. So you're going to ask questions like that. I get it. So I usually say something like that and watch their sort of heart sink in front of me because they're kind of hoping I'm going to say, oh man, you got to use this software. That'll make all the cool stuff happen. But yeah, I'll always follow it up with trying to talk to them for 5 minutes about approach, one of the things I usually tell young guys is, because, I mean, we all start out, and to this day, like, I'll try and copy things. I was doing it this morning. I was writing a song on guitar, and I was sort of copying a bit of a progression I heard in a song that I liked last night. But as I'm sort of working it out, listening to the song and kind of figuring out the chords and playing around with it and sort of learning it, but not really intending to learn it fully, I'm always tuned into like when I stuff it up and do something wrong as I'm trying to learn something, because that's where it becomes interesting and it becomes your own.
Happy accident.
Happy accident, yeah. So I always encourage young guys to like, follow their mistakes, because that's where you'll find your voice and that's where you'll find your way. Because if you stick too hard to trying to copy something, there's nothing wrong with copying something as a start point, because you're inspired by it and you want to do something like that and as good as that. But at the end of the day, if you can stay on that route, you're always just going to end up with, a shitty copy of whatever that is. Whereas if you veer off that path and let your own voice come out, it's like you might actually do something that's as great or greater than that, and it's yours 100%. It's not just a shitty imitation. So.
Yeah, it's like...
Sorry, am I allowed to swear on this?
Of course, you can fucking swear as much as you want.
I just thought maybe like every time I swear you're going to... there's like 15 hours of editing the word shit out.
Not at all, man. So what an interesting time in music in general. And I'm guessing that when you get to make those edits at home, go out and play them, that's ultimate validation, because... any DJ knows what songs work and what songs don't. And when you can figure out those little bits, take them home, craft it into your own track to an extent, and play it, that must be like, fuck, this is an awesome feeling.
Yeah, it was. It took a while, as I say, because I was sort of making these records that I knew were working, because like Boogs and Spacey had played them, but I just didn't have... There was a long time there where I'd barely play my own stuff because, like I said, most of my work was sort of DJing in bars, in small venues. And then, the few little club or dance floor sets that I had, even if it was a dance floor, it's like I was probably playing more sort of groovy, boogie, sort of house, funk kind of music. And these things I was making were these sort of big, sort of electro monster kind of heavy, hard-hitting club things. And it was like they were just too much. I remember sometimes I'd sort of queue up I'll play my own record. And it was like you look at the room and just kind of go, this is going to kind of feel like a slap in the face to everyone right now. So I just wouldn't play it. So there was a good... sort of 3 or 4 years there where I barely played my own stuff.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And a bar gig to play a big electro banger that you've been working on
that
samples a guitar riff from the 70s may not be the right time.
That's right, yeah. So, hey, I was being professional.
So then do you start DJing at Revolver then?
Yeah, around that time as well, I was starting to pick up gigs at Revolver. So at that point, I had many years of history with Revolver. Like, we were talking about it before. I was actually involved, literally built the place, so I helped do a lot of the demolition of the parachute factory and the stuff that was there. And I carried all the raw materials up that they built the bar with. I don't have any building background, so I was just labouring. But yeah, I can literally say that I helped build Revolver.
There you go. Physically and
emotionally, no.
No, but build it to what it is now, because you have been playing there regularly for so long.
Yeah. So I had a few, I was sort of, trying to get in there and get a few gigs and stuff. The two businesses were quite separate too back then. So the rehearsal studios and the retail outlet downstairs was sort of one thing. And then the club was a completely separate business. So we shared the building and shared the name Revolver, but they were very separate entities. So it wasn't like I didn't sort of know everyone. I sort of knew the people who were there and doing it and whatever. But at the same time, I'm a sort of brand new DJ. So my bands used to play there from the start. I played there in bands, but getting a DJ gig there was a different thing. It's like I was established.
Who was booking the DJs?
Back then there was two girls. There's a girl called Tina who initially booked the first couple of years, but by the time I was getting booked there for a long time, they had, and her partner, I think to this day, is the guy that started Burn, Melbourne. Brendan, yeah, what's his partner? He's got kids with her and stuff.
I don't know.
Carrie.
I spoke to him the other day, and he was, we were talking about this, but yep.
Yeah, Carrie Webb, I believe. I even got the surname. She booked DJs and bands in there.
So you had to try and set. So you're like, hey, even though I'm playing these people are playing my records, I need to impress you enough to get a gig.
Kind of, yeah. I never pushed myself too much on people. It's like I never did much cold calling, but you'd sort of, when you got to know someone. I can't remember. I think I did a few mix CDs. Most of your gigs really come through friends, though. It's like, somebody would be given, 6 hours to program on a Friday night or something like that. And then, your mate would get booked for one of those 2-hour spots and he'd let you play a few records with him while he was doing that. and then the guy running that would maybe think of you the next time. You know what I mean? It was all. I feel like most of it came like that. It wasn't kind of like, hey, how you doing? Can I have a gig?
Yeah.
Although I'm sure I did that. It was a gradual thing. But then within a couple of years, I started doing a few of the more sort of, bigger sort of club guest spots in there. Really just sort of sneaking it in. And then in 2002, I actually became a resident there on Thursday nights for about 2 years with Tony Pixelton and a guy called Kane Glenister. And the three of us they were already running it, I think, for maybe a couple of years before I came on board. Their third sort of weekly resident dropped off and I came in. And so Thursday nights for the first couple of years.
And how would you deem the style of music? You were playing everything?
Yeah, sort of house and electro clash, bit of techno-y sort of stuff. But it was a Thursday night, so it was never that busy, not compared to the weekends.
This is way before Colonel Tans and that sort of thing.
No. Well, the restaurant was there before it was Colonel Tans. It was just it was another one of the branches of Paddy Thai, Paddy Thai was a chain of Thai restaurants that Tan, who owns that Revolver building, he basically bankrolled Revolver from this chain of Paddy Thai restaurants.
Is he still the dude who's living there?
Yeah, still owns.
I was
owns
up there recently. It's amazing, man.
Yeah. So that's his place up there. Well, you were probably just in the first level. Yeah, and then he's got another part which he lives in. So yeah, he's still there. Tanon Sak Puntra and Porn.
It's crazy to think that someone lives there, though.
Yeah, I remember when because he only built that maybe a couple of years after the club opened. I thought he was insane. I remember we had to drag up all of these soundproofing bricks to go into his floor, but I'm still sure it must be bloody noisy up there. But he's been there for 25 years, so.
Good times. So then you start doing your Thursday, and you're still doing your bar gigs and doing other gigs here and there, I'm guessing?
Yeah, and doing live electronic music with Bionikworld. Triple J got behind us, and we, sort of popped off from that. We had a track that they were sort of had on daily rotation for ages.
Through Unearthed, or this is just on the rotation?
No, well, so I had the association with Rubber Records, so I just went to David Vodicka and said, this is this duo thing that I'm doing, and he said, sounds good, let's put the album out. So got serviced properly, and we got it to Triple J, and they liked it, and we did like Live at the Wireless for Triple J, and so we very quickly went from just playing underground Melbourne clubs to doing a few festival spots around Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, and then the other half of that, my friend Kane was sort of determined to get overseas and take a crack at the overseas market. So after about 2 years, we packed up our bags and went to Barcelona to base ourselves out of there. So,
and as someone with a skating background, that's a cool city, and musically as well, man.
Probably would have been, yeah. I didn't last for very long. It didn't sort of work.
Didn't dig it?
Well, I liked it, but we really didn't have any money behind me, and it was sort of, struggling to kind of get work over there and stuff. So I basically came back after about 3 or 4 months. He stayed on, and we, so the duo sort of broke up.
Cool experience, though?
It was a cool experience, yeah. A bunch of cool stuff happened, but I mean, one of the big things was I realised how much I really liked my life that I'd sort of spent the better part of 5 years in Melbourne building before that. I liked the Melbourne scene and, the little place that I was starting to carve myself out. And I was really nothing in the scene then. I mean, not that I think I'm something now, but, my little place and the amount of gigs I could get was very small compared to what I was able to go on and do. But it was still, I just sort of had this vision of, just sort of getting home and setting up in a little house and sort of, I was still really finding my way in production when I started the Bionikworld thing with Kane. And I had very good arrangement skills, and I had the industry contacts to get us out and get records out and get us shows and stuff. And he had the technical side of it down. He's also a great writer. So between the two of us, it was a very good combination. But after a couple of years, I think we just wanted to go our own separate way. Like I just sort of envisioned myself setting up in a house, like a 2-bedroom house, and one's a bedroom and one's going to be my studio, and I'm just going to live off the DJing and just make cool records that my friends can play in their DJ sets. That's what I wanted to do. And I came back to Australia, and that's when I really started the T-Rek thing properly. I already had the name T-Rek when I DJ and stuff, but I hadn't put out records under the name T-Rek because everything was going out under Bionikworld.
Yep.
And that's when I came back with a real bee in my bonnet and sat down and wrote about 4 albums worth of material in that first year or so, and then had to work for about the next 3 years just to get it all out, because it was initially it was everything was still physical based, so just trying to get people to sign the records and put them out physically was a thing, because I was making way more records than I could find homes for, which is why I ultimately started my own label. So
yep, and so then. You are still so you're working full time as a DJ. You don't have to do the dishy thing anymore, so you can focus on music properly. You're playing music at night. You're making music during the day.
Yeah. Just sort of scraping out just enough gigs to get by. I wasn't, for that another good few years. It was still pretty hand to mouth sort of existence, but it was working.
And so then you, like you said, you started your own label, so you can get stuff out there. Tell us about that process, man.
Well, I got there was a record store called Rhythm and Soul in you'd remember. Yep. They had 2 stores at that time. They had Greville Street one, and they had one in the city. They were sort of expanding. I think just around that time that opened the city store, and then
is it Manchester Lane, or is it down that lane?
Yeah. What is the lane? I should know.
I remember.
Yeah. I ended up having a studio in there. Greg Molinaro that ran that, and then. I think he had something like, because I think they were and also very much fancied themselves as sort of trendsetters. So I think what Greg told me what was happening was that he'd sort of do whatever online research and sort of pick all the records. Like, these are the records we're going to sort of bring in, that we feel that we can sort of push through the shops, and then other retailers and wholesalers would sort of copy him. Mm-hmm. And so he started his own music wholesale, vinyl importing company.
Yep.
And then he wanted to start sort of pressing a few records. So actually the first record he did was the Led Zeppelin bootleg I mentioned before.
I reckon I might have some of these bootlegs, yeah.
Yeah, you may do.
All my house is up that sort of top sort of section there.
Oh, it looks like I'll be getting up the ladder later.
Yeah. No, I remember, because this is when I first sort of got into DJing around that time, and I would go to Rhythm and Soul and other record stores, and they would have the handwritten sticker at the top with what the bootleg was, and you didn't know where it came from or who was behind it, and I'm guessing you were behind something.
So play this record, the people that go crazy. Yeah. Steve from Rhythm and Soul. And then Greg signed another record of mine and put that out.
And without getting into the legalities too much, it's bootleg records.
No. First one was a bootleg, and the rest of it, then it was my original stuff, 100%.
Okay,
so,
all right. Yeah. So because the bootlegs were coming out at those shops a lot at that point in time, which I was really interested in.
Yeah.
And I would buy them, and that was a whole sort of thing that people would just sort of turn a blind eye to.
Yeah, I did. So there was a couple of bootlegs as well. There's a Pussycat Dolls bootleg I did, which still gets played a lot. So there was a couple of bootleg things. But my bootlegs, like the Led Zeppelin and the Pussycat Doll one, which are still, I get, I never go a month in the last 20 years without somebody requesting those songs from me. I mean, there's bootlegs where it's really just like, it's pretty much the song and someone's just beefed up the beats or something. Yeah. That's not what I was doing. So like the Led Zeppelin one was like, that was a whole piece of music which is 100% mine that had nothing to do with Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
But then I just sampled like, a bit of a Robert Plant vocal, and like the breakdown had like a snippet of a Led Zeppelin song in it. But effectively like 98% of it was wholly original.
Yep.
The Pussycat Dolls one was sort of similar. Like, it blatantly sampled, the hook from this song, but like all the music underneath it was 100% original. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't just sort of doing mashups and stuff like that. I mean, I do that stuff as well, but the things that I was committing and putting out on vinyl were, full productions. Like, it was more like, they're sort of less bootlegs and mashups, more just like, original compositions that blatantly sampled something without clearing it, so...
Which
I feel like I'm trying to make it okay.
No, but which in a copyright term, it doesn't even really matter. But it justifies. Not, I get it from an artistic point of view. You're not just making a house remix of a popular song, which a lot of that was happening.
It still does, and it's great. I play a lot of things like that, and I'll make things like that as well. But that's the kind of stuff. It's like you just chuck it on SoundCloud and forget about it. I wouldn't sort of go out of my way to make artwork and press 500 copies and sell them. But
there was a lot of white labels doing the rounds in that point of time, because that's when I first got involved in going to record stores and buying records like myself, and I acquired a lot of that shit myself. But I get what you're saying. You're doing it in a more artistic way.
Well, I wasn't trying to sell that so much, but maybe I was,
So, where are we in the journey? I can't quite remember. But you are at this stage of your journey. You are playing at Revolver as on top of other places, playing your own edits and really making a name for yourself as T-Rek, the DJ, and removing yourself from the drumming and live music stuff. You're still doing that in the background, but you're more known for the DJing stuff.
Yeah, very much so. I just got so caught up in all the DJing electronic music stuff. It just naturally took me away from the band stuff. I've always had kept my toes in the water and done bits and pieces here and there, but it's always been a labour of love. It's just as any musicians know, it's hard to make a living doing that stuff. It's not easy to make a living as a DJ either, but it's a little bit more feasible than trying to be in a rock and roll band. So,
you picked the path of least resistance.
I didn't really choose it. Yeah, it was when the DJing thing became solid, I just ran to the car to get a chewing gum. And now I'm chewing and catching my breath, and we're back in the room. So I was sort of making my own records and stuff, doing sort of different experimental band things. I'm a drummer first and foremost. Played in a lot of different rock and roll bands. But where was I going with that? And then I started working with, electronic musicians as well. There's a guy called Honey Smack. You know him. He and I have had a lot of different projects over the years with him sort of running a table of synthesizers and me playing drums, and then various other musicians join us on and off.
He's hopefully coming in a couple of weeks to do an episode.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. He's terrible. No, he's one of my very good friends. He and I actually, as I said, we had a couple of different bands with other musicians and him and I, but the latest incarnation we've been doing for the last 2 years or so is just the two of us, and we're currently called Dumb Machine Music. I've always had my hand in the live music stuff. But where did it sort of go from there? Started putting out albums as T-Rek. The first album was really a mix of all of those things. Had my voice on it singing.
Is that something you always wanted to do, or you did it because you felt like it needed vocals and you were the one that was going to do it?
I think when I came back from overseas, these songs started coming out of me that were, I started making more. I guess when I started playing with electronic music, you just. What the hell was that?
That speaker just popped.
Okay. So I sort of got to the point where my electronic music was. I got to the point where I could make stuff good enough, to play it in the clubs, and had a bunch of stuff out. Oh, actually, I'll pick up from there. I just remember where we dropped off before we went, before we both took a piss break. Was with the record label. So I started putting out my own records on vinyl, and was able to, mainly through the rhythm and soul stores, be able to sell a couple of hundred copies, just enough to really pay for the pressing. And, because the first pressing, you'd lose money. You'd lose about $4 a copy, and then the second pressing, you make about $10 a copy. So it'd be just enough to break even, and then make enough to then put that $1,000 or so back in.
So where's the price breaks at $200 or something? How does it? Because I'm just curious. How do you lose money and then break? Is it because all the hard work is done with the second pressing?
Because a lot of what you were paying for back then, it was about, I think it was about $1,100, $1,200, something like that, for 100 copies. And this is a white label in a white sleeve, so literally nothing, not even a cardboard sleeve. But about $800 or $900 is the setup, to make the master and stuff. Yep. And then you would pay. I think it was $2.50 a copy, something like that. $3.50 a copy. But on top of that $800 setup fee. So it came in somewhere around that $1,200 point. And then I'd sell them to the record stores for, I can't remember, I think they'd pay about $10 each or something, So you'd be losing about $1.50 a copy, something like that. But then your next pressing, you've got the master built, so you're not paying that $800 setup cost, you're just paying $2.50 a copy. Yep. So your second pressing of 100 would be $350 or something, and you're selling those for $10 a copy, so you'd break even and make a few bucks, and then I'd just put that straight back in. But that whole process played out over 18 months, 2 years. It was really quick because even those CDJs, the ones that we all play on now, they've been out for many years at that point, but the clubs were a bit slow on sort of actually making them standard equipment in the clubs because they're expensive and stuff. But all of a sudden, all the clubs, it was so quick, man. You'd remember, like within 6 months, you'd turn up to a gig and it's like, wow, there's no turntables here. And then the kids figured out that they could download MP3s and stuff and like burn it to CDs. And so all the record stores just went belly up and disappeared, again, as you remember. So I went from just being able to sell a couple of hundred copies through the 2 Rhythm and Soul stores. And then I remember DMC started hitting me up and I put some in there. And then who's the distributor? I think it was Stomp, called me up and actually said, do you want to do a distro deal with us? Send us like 80 copies and we'll put them around shops around Australia. And I went from being able to sell 200 copies in a few weeks through 2 shops to not being able to move 20 copies with like national distribution. It was that quick.
Yeah. And that's the internet, that's technology. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah. So, excuse me, adjusting myself. I got to stop doing that. I have this radio set up at home, so I'm used to pushing this around with my chin. Yeah. So, but at the same time, that was when Beatport was starting.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get on Beatport, and they weren't really interested. And, at this point I had a huge amount of records as well that I hadn't released on vinyl. Like I'd done about 10 or 15 pressings, about 10 on my own label, maybe 5 pressings with other labels. But at the same time I was just churning out music. So, and it was starting to, this Beatport thing was kicking off, which is, for anyone that doesn't know, is kind of like, sort of this day, it's kind of like iTunes for DJs, where we, most DJs, I think like 90% of music that's sold to DJs, something like that, is sold through Beatport. But I befriended Radio Slave, Matt Edwards, who's like still one of the biggest DJs in the world. Just at some kick-ons at a friend's party that he was out here playing for. And I was, having a bit of a drunk cry to him about, Beatport, ignore me and stuff. And he was like, I remember he just sort of took a moment, sort of looked down, and he's like, tell him you know me, I was like, all right. So sure enough, I sent them an email the next week, my friend Matt Edwards, blah, blah. As soon as I dropped his name, the sign-up forms came, and I was on Beatport, 3 weeks later.
So that was the vetting process? You had to know someone, or you think that they just were being selective in that point of time with who they let on the platform?
I think they were being selective. I think the whole thing of like digital aggregators was, probably existed then in minute sort of form. It was just sort of starting to take off. So this is before, like, I don't know if this is too inside baseball or whatever, but now, you go to an aggregator, you send your music to them, and, the aggregator will then put you on Beatport, iTunes, Apple Music, Google Play, Spotify, etc. I was able to get that direct relationship with Beatport and start just putting up all the stuff that I'd had on vinyl, I could make available online. And of course, it's great too, because there's no, you're not stuffing around and doing test pressings and paying for vinyl pressings and hoping they sell and wondering where you're going to put the 150 copies that didn't sell.
But it also is the other side of the coin, the kind of the beginning of the end for artists to make significant money.
I don't know about that, because like through all of those years, I was like never making money anyway.
Yep.
I mean, really, even with a simple record, like, if you go one step back to the 90s, like a band, like Berserk or Bionikworld, the duo I did, by the time, you go into a studio, make an album, the expenses for that, say you've got the expenses of recording and mixing and mastering, and then other associated promotional costs, maybe doing a video and, paying a PR person and stuff like that. Even a very cheap record, you're still looking at 20 or 30 grand, something like that.
Yep. And then you've got a distributor and you've got a lot of...
Well, no, this is doing it for a label, so they take care of that. But, I mean, you can stop me if you know this already, but so you get, I think it's somewhere around, back then, I don't think it's that much different now, but something like 15 to 18% of, say, a CD wholesale. So like wholesale on the CD would have been $12-15. So 10 or 15%, like 15% of that is what your profit is, right? So maybe $1 or $2 per CD. Now, of each dollar of that CD, you've got to pay back that 20 or 30 grand in expenses to the label out of your $1.50 per CD before you start making anything. So it effectively means that, like, if you're selling any less than 50,000 copies of something, you're not making any money. So, and it's still, the model is not that much different now. Yeah. So it's really that thing of people no longer making money out of music. It was always for the top 2% anyway, and I've never been up in those sort of echelons. I think.
No,
so, I mean, the other ways to make money is like if you have a hit record and everyone knows it and knows your name, and you're not still in that top 2%. So you're not making money out of the selling of the record. But what you are getting is, because everyone knows you, you can suddenly command higher fees for live performances. You might be able to sell merch at shows, and even just sell out a venue and make a lot more money on the door. So for someone like me, that was never an issue. So.
No. And it also, I guess, is a really interesting time for electronic music, because it kind of, house music becomes very popular in that mid-2000s sort of era as well. Like commercially, it goes from being something that was played in clubs and in the smaller rooms to the mainstream music on the radio and what party people want to fucking hear.
A difference, I tell you, when I noticed it was when house music seemed to become the main thing that you'd hear coming out of tradies radios when you drive past a working site. I was like, what happened to Chisel? It was cold Chisel for like 30 years. And then all of a sudden it was like, I can't think of a good example. What's his name?
Van Helden or something.
Van Helden, yeah. No, I was trying to think of someone else more cheesy, but anyway, that'll do. Van Helden.
Yeah, well, who was cheesy? I don't know.
I was trying to think. Calvin Harris. I don't know why I was trying to think.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good example.
I think that was the one. I remember suddenly hearing this Calvin Harris song everywhere. I can't even remember what it was, but then it was coming out of tradies radios in building sites, and I was like, wow, that's a jump from Midnight Oil and Cold Chisel.
But that's a generational thing as well. I guess the tradies were getting younger. But yeah, it became the popular music. It went from being the music in the back room to being the music in the main room of the clubs, and it just became the mainstream music you'd hear on the fucking radio or you'd see on TV and that sort of thing. Yeah,
no, you're right. Yeah, it was a big shift. But I mean, I didn't. Oh, I was going to say I never capitalized on that, but I guess I did. In 2009, I made a record that. It took off and did really. It was a number one ARIA hit. I actually did a remix for a guy from overseas, a producer who I liked, who just found me, I think, through MySpace. It was like probably the dying years of MySpace. And he asked me to remix a track, and I did this remix. Excuse me. But I only used two parts of his track.
Tell us the track.
Oh, it was called Out My Bitch. Sorry. But the two sounds I used from his original parts were a synth stab that went beep and a vocal, which was as a Two Live Crew vocal sample, which is not his sample, you know what I mean? Everyone sampled that. And I did it and gave it to him, and I started giving it to a few friends, and it started taking off in the clubs just from me burning CDs and giving it to a few guys. And one of the people I gave it to was John Corse. He runs Vicious Vinyl and was, running, I think, the Saturday Night Nova thing with Grant Smiley at the time. And he liked it so much that he just took it to Ministry of Sound when he was doing one of their annuals, and I got a call from them saying, hey, like who owns this? We want to license it for the Ministry of Sound annual. And I've been sitting on it for about 3 months, and this French guy was like not really getting back to me. And I kind of thought, I could just take this and rename it, because it's literally like a one-note sample and a sample he doesn't own. So I just sort of said, hey, man, I think I might take this back and put it out myself. He's like, yeah, okay, no worries. So I,
and
sort
you
of
knew
took
you
the
already
track
had
back,
the Ministry of Sound, interested.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I missed a bit. So I was sent to Ministry. I said, I think I got on the phone to the guy. I said, explain the situation. I said, yeah, I'm thinking about taking this back and saying it's my own original track and blah, blah, blah. And they said, yeah, if you want to do that, we'll sign it and put it out. So they, put it out as a track themselves at the same time as it went out on the Ministry of Sound annual. And the second week after it came out, it was number one. So
does that? I often wondered about how the ins and outs of that worked. As somebody who was very interested in house music at that point in time, you'd go into the record store, you would see these records, you'd probably buy them, and then 12 months later, they might appear on the Ministry of Sound thing, which you'd take as validations. Like, all right, well, I saw that song, I liked it before.
Yeah, they
saw the commercial appeal. They would almost cherry pick the different minor labels and then put them out on their label. Is that how it worked? Would they handle the clearing of it?
Oh, well, when you it's a bit different now. Everything's sort of global because of the digital thing. But back then, for example, like maybe some guy in Europe makes a little tune, he signs it to a cool little label, and then a few copies, like maybe 1,000 or 2 of those copies physically on vinyl end up in Australia, and a few tastemaker DJs grab them, and it becomes a hit in the clubs here. But it's not really a hit anywhere else in the world, and it hasn't been distributed majorly. And then someone like a Ministry of Sound, the Australian Ministry of Sound, might sort of pick it up because John Corse or someone likes it, because it's like, hey man, this is there's only like 1,000 copies floating around the entire world, but it's blowing up in the clubs, let's put it on the annual and let's license it for the Australian territory and put it out. So, tracks sometimes get a second lease of life that way.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny because of my DJ background. I'll have people ring me up every now and then humming a song to me like, what is this song? Why can't I find it on Spotify? I'm like, you're never going to find that
I'm not Shazam.
No, but I don't mind. It's a fun game to play.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, you're never going to find that because that would have been a re-edit that only ended up on one compilation CD that some fucking venue gave out for free at a night. You're not going to find that on Spotify,
On Spotify, no. But most things are on YouTube, I think, really, these days.
Yeah, that's where you'd have to go. And a lot of those different compilation sort of CDs...
Just like the 3000 podcast, now available on YouTube. All
30... You'll be 136 or something.
All 136 episodes.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of those edits that were on those sort of mix CDs and stuff were different DJs in this territory would do those remixes, and those actual edits that you'd hear here, you were probably not getting that on the European release or the US release or whatever.
Yeah, are you talking about edits or remixes?
Well, just in those, you'd get different edits on those compilation CDs that people would do it from their different territories or whatever.
Yeah, different mixes. Yeah, sometimes it'd be the remix of like a track would be the thing that was big, So you see that with Australian. Australia's a great example because we're, so sort of geographically removed and we're our own little market. So often I would see that. Like I would buy a 12-inch, and you'd have the original track on there, which was, it's kind of cool, but it's not really usable in the club. And you'd have some other remix, and then you'd have, the other remix on there. It's like, wow, that's an absolute banger. I'm going to play that. And that's the one that would get licensed a year later for Ministry or something else, so they'd actually license the remix. There's a million examples of, remixes and particularly club remixes being, the actual hit on the package. And you barely, you hear the original, it's almost a novelty. It's like, oh, is that what it sounded like originally?
Yeah.
I've had that with some of my tracks, the orchestrated guys, used to remix. I think there's 3 singles I put out where like, people were asking me, they think of it as, there's a song of mine called New Strange, for example. And people come to me and go, can you play T-Rek New Strange? Like, they know I'm T-Rek and they know they're asking me for my record. But I can tell by the type of person that's like, you've never heard the original because it's basically a rock song. It's like, you want to hear the orchestrated remix, which is cool too. Like,
do you pull that out of your bag?
The orchestrated one? Yeah, I played that more because they did the clubbier one. Like, I mean, that song, for example, New Strange, I don't think I've ever played the original in a club because it's got a big dance beat behind it, but it's more like a 3-minute rock song that happens to have a chunky fat beat behind it. Yeah. But in most clubs, it would just sound a little awkward in a dance set, whereas, they've done a 6-minute, very sort of, electro house club version of it. That's the one to play. So.
And so do people just reach out and say, hey, we dig this song, can we have the stems? And you look at who they are and say, yeah, or no? Like, I guess is that how the process generally works? No,
that's rarely happened. All the remixes I've had done over the years is just, I've got a single coming out. I want to do a few remixes. And there was always people around that were like, this guy's done a couple of originals that maybe I helped him do some mixing or mastering. Like, and I kind of like what he's doing. I'd like to hear his take on that. Some guys like Orchestrated and a few other guys that I would ask repeatedly through those years because they just always did something solid,
Yep. So you reached out to them?
Always reached out to them, yeah. It's always been friends. I've never asked anyone I don't know to do a remix. So.
But do bootleg copies of stuff people have remixed without your permission pop up?
Yeah.
And how do you handle that? Is it flattering?
Yeah, it is flattering. Like, I mean, usually they're pretty... I mean, I still... I remember years ago, like looking up that Out My Bitch one on SoundCloud. There was literally hundreds of people sort of doing mashups and bootlegs. I looked it up again recently, and most of them are pretty horrible. One good story that came out of that though was one guy did one and sent it to me, and I liked it so much that I ended up like that was the Out My Bitch single that we ended up putting it out like I think maybe a month after the single package came out. We put out his bootleg because it was really solid. And then I think I got him to do remixes of my next 2 singles as well. Ended up being a guy called Benson, who's massive now. Like, I think he's like good mates with Dom Dollar and does all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But he was just some kid that bootlegged my record, and I put out his records and then, he went sailing past me. Like,
well, everyone's got to start somewhere. You were sampling Led Zeppelin, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't heard from those boys yet.
I haven't reached out.
I haven't reached out. Jimmy, I'm here. Call me. So,
but that is, look, in that sort of late 2000s, rock and dance music really crossed over a lot, and the lines were very blurred about whether this band was an electronic band, whether they were a rock band, what was, you know what I mean? There was and it was a very interesting time for music, and independent sort of indie sounding music was going mainstream, and it was all over the place.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, no, you're right. It's funny, and I've always sort of lived in there. I've always been trying to sort of mash up those things, like take the excuse me, I remember I had a real, not a bee in my bonnet, but I found that most of the time when rock bands that I liked tried to incorporate electronics, it was clunky and didn't really work. And then I found most of the time where dance music artists that I like tried to incorporate electric guitars and a rock and roll sort of thing was clunky and didn't really work. Like it was too much, too little, too whatever.
There's certain examples where it works.
Oh, there's hundreds of examples where it works, but like that was the sort of thing that I found was like a lot of times to me it didn't work. Like it missed the point. You know, like it just sounded, you know, too much or a bit, you know, twee or something like that. But so I was always trying to do something that I thought, to my mind, you know, was a good combination of those things, because the things I love about rock and roll and dance music are the same sort of things, you know, which is like, it's just a certain attitude, which is, you know, I like a bit of, you know, like a toughness and a meanness sort of, you know, married to like a sexiness and a bit of a, you know, a nod and a wink and a bit of a sneer and a, you know, bit of sort of humor in there, like that kind of combination of stuff. Like that's all my favorite rock and roll music has that. And my favorite dance music has that. And I was like trying to sort of mesh those things together.
Can you think of an example of some acts that have done it in a way that you think is really remarkable?
Aside from me? No, I'm joking. I should be able to. Oh, it's ridiculous. There's so many. I'm having a bit of a blank. Oh, well, I mean, there's different levels. A band like, you know, my favorite band is Queens of the Stone Age, and they haven't really ever tried to incorporate electronics into their music so much. I mean, they've used synthesizers a bit more in recent records, but it's always like a guy playing synth live with a rock band. So they've never tried to do like dance versions or remixes so much, but their attitude, you know, like they're like, to me, they're the, you know, toughest and sort of, you know, manliest blokey band out there. Like, you know, they're tough and hard and that stuff, but they embrace their sort of feminine side, you know what I mean? So they have this real sexy kind of girliness to some of their slower jams and stuff. Like, so they're a good rock band that's doing it. So there's a little whistly wheeze coming out of my voice. Oh man, I'm just drawing a blank now. I can't think. Okay. Like if I had my USB in front of me, I could find you 100 records that did that. But that's what I was sort of aiming for, you know, with rock.
And that, yeah, to find that happy medium between the grittiness of the rock and the electronic influences as well. Put them together, and the perfect product comes out.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, even some of the things that I did, you know, just over that sort of 10, 15 year ago sort of break, like even now I listen back to it and it's like most of it I'm still quite proud of, and it's just like I wish I just didn't use that synth sound on that thing, or that approach was a little bit misguided. But you're always just sort of swinging at stuff. That's, excuse me, when you're just trying to challenge yourself and you know, and do interesting things, you know, you're not always going to look back and love every aspect of all of it, but I'm relatively proud of 95% of it.
So when the DJ club scene went predominantly all digital, which kind of happened by that mid-2000s, like you said, the turntables kind of got turfed unless the
turf tables.
Yeah, well, they just became drink coasters for everybody for quite a while.
Which was funny because when the CDJs came in, I remember we got them in at Revolver, and the owner was pissed off because they weren't being used that much straight away. And you could still smoke in the clubs then, and everyone was just putting cigarettes on them. And so we had these expensive machines that were just getting cigarette burns. And he was just like, I didn't pay $3,000 for ashtrays. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. but then the shift happened where they just you know, and it's probably around about that time. I think 2007. You weren't allowed to smoke inside anymore.
And yeah, I think it was somewhere in there.
Then all of a sudden, CDJs take over, and then the turntables, unless the DJ requests the turntables, they were probably not even pulled out of the fucking storeroom for a while.
Yeah, and that's largely the same to this day, actually. So. Yeah.
So then that changes the way that people are listening to music, how people are playing music. Did you adapt to that digital age quite seamlessly?
Yeah, I did. I was, I mean, I was well ahead of it, and not in any way of like I was ahead of it, man, in some cool way. It was a practical thing, as I was saying earlier. Like I was already, since 2002, I've been traveling around with my own CDJ, so it was like, oh great, I don't have to bring mine with me. And I was doing a lot of my own bootlegs, edits, mashups, my own productions, and even before CDJs were everywhere, I got into transferring vinyl as well because. I just always, it was just like even 2 big crates of vinyl, it was never enough music for me. Like, if you're going out and playing a couple of different gigs and long sets as we play at Revolver, there was just never enough music for me. So I started recording my records into the computer and then burning them onto CD. And, because that was one less piece of vinyl I had to take. Like I could have, 10 records on one CD. So yeah, I was, to me, it was more like when that change happened, I was like, oh, thank God. I mean, I was sad that the the record shop culture went away. That was the thing I had. I loved that part of my job was going out through the middle of the week. I'd have a day in the city and I'd bounce around those shops. You go to one where like you had your friends and, you'd talk to a lot of people and they'd recommend a couple of things and you find cool records, and you go to another shop where you didn't know anyone, you just sniff around quietly. Then you go to the other shop. Or Rhythm and Soul, actually, there was a guy called Rob that worked in there, and I'd come in sometimes and he'd have this weird smile that he'd give me. And I'd be like, what's going on? And he'd be like, I've got one of the best records I've heard all year, and no one wants to buy it because it's awesome, and you're weird, and you'll buy it, And I used to love that, and he'd put it on, we'd just sit there and go, this is great. And everyone else in the shop would be going, what's this crap, So I miss that kind of stuff, So I desperately miss that culture.
You'd get to the point where I'd go to record stores enough and people would know what you want. You'd walk in there and they'd have a few sitting there and go, here you go. Like, you might like this. I know you want this sound or whatever. Exactly.
Yeah. But, and that was, remember that guy that used to push records in Rhythm and Soul? Like, I used to see him, he used to just, he was good for business for them, but he was almost like a drug pusher or something, the way he'd push records on people. And he tried it on me when I was young too. Like, and he was like, you should listen to this record, you should buy it. I was like, why? And I was like, do you play out? Do you DJ? He was like, no. I was like, do you make records? He was like, no. I was like, well, shut up. And he loved it because everyone was scared of him, and I just basically told him to piss off, and we were good friends after that. So I was like, how would you know what works? You don't know what I like. You don't know what I'm playing. Shut up. Go away. You're just trying to sell something. Piss off.
Yeah. I was convinced that, they would make a $2 commission per record or something if they could upsell. I don't know.
I don't know whether maybe that went on somewhere, I wouldn't know, but I think it was
just had a quota to hit of how many records they could put through.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to, I don't know what I was it's just boyish competitive bullshit probably. But.
So you would turn up to your gigs now without your own CD player, with the CDJs that are there and your old flip book of CDs, like
Absolutely. Which were always very, and you remember this, they were very well made because I remember they used to fit perfectly in a like they were this like a 12-inch record cover. That was the CD flip things, yeah.
And you could even use your vinyl record holder to put your CD wallets in because they would sort of fit in there nicely as well. So you'd turn
the bag,
up,
you mean?
Yeah, the bag.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
perfect. It would just sit in there nicely. So then that you started doing that. Then the development eventually comes where you can use micro SD cards in some of them. Did you get into that? I never did that.
We can still do that. That was a precursor to the USB thing, wasn't it? Yeah. No, I didn't, and I was a late adapter with the USB stuff as well. I'm just, I'm really disinterested in technology until I realised that, like, it's been out for a while. It's been sort of tested by everyone and gone through its weird phase. And suddenly, someone, I'll be saying, "Oh man, I just wish I could do whatever," and someone would be like, "Man, you can do that. You just get a USB." And I was like, "What? Hang on, what? I can do what with it?" So I remember when everyone had sort of moved over to USBs, I was still very much hanging on the CDs for a while. And then as soon as I
you couldn't see the grid with the CDs.
Yeah, probably something like that. But coming from vinyl, I notice that now when it happens. But until you know it's something you miss, it was like I can't miss something I never knew was there.
Yeah.
So I think it was 2013 I started using the USBs, and then I just went like so far into it. Like I really love Record Box as a. That's my main tool. Is like I barely make playlists. I carry a huge amount of music. I have like 0.5 terabyte sticks, and I constantly just dump huge amounts of music in, and it's all the right type of file and all the extensions and all the descriptions. And I always like write a description in there unless I know what it is, and then I just play out of my collection. So I don't really use playlists at all. I just have like all the files are very organized. You know what I mean? So the collection is organized. And I've sort of been going down that route for a long time. So
one thing I always found personally with Record Box, which with the file maintenance side of it, is you have to then have it stored on your computer in a way that makes sense. Now, when you get new music, whether you download it, whether you've ripped it from vinyl, wherever CDs you've acquired it from, you got to store it in somewhere. Then you got to add it to your collection, and then you can't move that stuff, because if you move that, then it fucks with the files, and then you have a bad time.
Well, you can go back and relocate it, but that's a pain in the butt. Yeah, so I just have one directory. It's an external hard drive, and it's just one folder, and everything sits in that.
So you don't have update 2025 January where you've got stuff from this month and put that in there in an own folder. You just dump it in there. It just
dumps in there. So well, if I want to look at it like that, I just go sort by date added, and all my new stuff's at the top. You know. So
okay, yeah.
But there's a whole. I won't do it on here because it's like just nerds talking about nerd stuff. But yeah, I've developed a whole system which
that works for you.
Yeah, and I'm sort of super proud of it. Like I feel like it's been going on for so long now. Like I kind of. Maybe for the first 5 years, I was sort of working with it. And just in the last 5 years, like I've really locked it down to this sort of art and science that just works so well for me. And now it just like my music collection, digital music collection just feels like this awesome thing that I have, and I can just keep pumping stuff into it over the years. And it's always like I can, even if I haven't, had time to sort of put music in for a month or so, like I can always get lost in the collection. There's always something new in there, or something that's I haven't thought of for so long, that it's new kind of thing.
So when you are playing out, if everything's just in there in this huge, big casserole of music, how do you find what you need if you don't categorize them into crates or playlists?
Because I will use the sort function. So, I mean, in a classic way, like, if I go on a bar gig on a Saturday night, like we were talking about La La Land that I play at, and, that's a bar gig where it's, it's just a busy bar on a Saturday night, and I can really play. They trust me and like me to do whatever I want. So I might, play hip-hop for a couple of hours and then a bit of house and disco. I might throw a bit of rock and roll in there.
So you're searching via BPMs?
Well, what I'll often do is whatever BPM the guy before me is playing, which is usually somewhere around 112 to 125, I'll just go to my track selection, which is literally 6,500 songs, and I just go sort by BPM, and then I just scroll through to, 118, whatever he's playing, and as I scroll through, I just see what jumps up at me, and I either recognize the music, or if I'm like, what is that again? Like I just look and there's a description there going, it's like, kind of bouncy old hip hop thing. I think Maloney played it in front of me once. It might be a bizarre thing like that, but I've developed my own language that tells me stuff, reminds me what it is, or tells me generally what it is. I'll cue it up and have a listen and go, man, that sounds all right. Or you just go, oh, that'd be a nice one to jump off to. So I just sort of follow threads like that.
And then the preparation though.
Yeah, because everything is, like the artist and the song title and my description and the key and everything is there. Sometimes I'll play off key, not off key, play from the key. I do play off key.
Does it matter? Do you think harmonic mixing matters? It does in some capacity, but not all the time.
I don't think it matters. I just it's a fun thing that I do. Like at Revolver, sometimes I'll do it. I say Revolver, but just because that's a club gig I do regularly. If I'm just in the mood where I want to play, say, fairly... kind of one-dimensional techno-y kind of stuff. Maybe that's because I play at Revolver every Monday morning, and for 6 months of the year, like they have internationals are playing before me, so I'll either play straight after the international, or there'll be like a local, for an hour between me and them. And if they're playing sort of deep techno-y kind of stuff, I'll follow the keys. So like I'm changing key, I'm playing relative keys to each track. So that's the one playlist I do have. So I have 24 playlists, which are just, cause everything gets dropped into key folders as well. So I'll just move through keys. Like I'll just play to a relative key, so I'm not getting stuck in one key. I'll keep moving. And it's just like, if I know they're relative keys, I can kind of smush them together a bit more. So maybe do like a long 2-minute mix. And it's like, I can see from the description on that one and the waveform that's like, well, the description tells me there's no vocal in it. And I can see from the waveform that it's fairly one-dimensional. And then I'll put this track in. This does have a vocal, and I'll sort of mix them together with a bass sound. And it's like, hey, that vocal actually sounds cool over that bass line. So then all of a sudden I'm doing a bit of a remix, and I'll ride that to its logical conclusion and then look for the next thing like that, Maybe I can get the bass line from the next track will also sit interestingly under this vocal. So I kind of feel like I've just done 2 remixes, so stuff like that. So
I think Record Box is an amazing program when you can use it for all its capabilities like that.
Yeah.
For someone like myself, I predominantly used it when I was playing more hip hop music and more, not four to the floor stuff.
Yep.
And I found that it can be janky when you try and analyze your files, and it'll with the four to the floor stuff, it works. This is the first beat. It grids it nicely, but a lot of it you have to go in there and kind of fuck with it a little bit. Do you find that with the stuff that's not as sort of 1, 2, 3, 4?
You mean just getting the grid right so it reads the BPM?
But even just knowing where you want to start if you get it'll quantize automatically for you. But if it's electronic made music, it works fine. If it's the Beastie Boys with weird sounds coming here and there, it's going to be different,
I'll give you some tips on that when we're off air.
Okay.
I could talk about it it'd probably take me 5 or 8 minutes to explain it, and I don't know whether it's very good for listeners.
Well, let's do it now, and we can take it out if it's really that
fine.
boring, but I like it.
Well, I mean, what was I going to say? Well, it's about sort of choosing your first beat. I actually do a lot of... as much as I say I'm very organised with the files, like with all my descriptions and stuff, I actually don't have the patience to set up the grids and stuff in there.
That's what I mean. It's very much in the preparation.
Yeah, but you can actually do it. I do it while I'm out working.
Yeah.
Especially quieter gigs, and that's where I'm playing more hip-hop and stuff like that. It will naturally kind of pick a start point, and more often than not, in those sort of things, it's wrong. Even on techno things, I find it's wrong. Well, not where I want it anyway.
Which the technology just hasn't got there yet, which is unusual with the technology that they've got.
Yeah, well, the record box, like the inbuilt stuff, is like Record Box it's a great filing software. It's actually really crap in a lot of ways as well. Are you listening, Pioneer? I mean, for example, like I use mixed in key to get a good read on the keys of things.
So that's still a thing, because I used to use that as well, but I thought that Record Box got their own key.
It does, but if you if you want an example, dump 20 tracks in there in Record Box, look at the keys that it gives you, then run it through mixed in key and watch how 30 to 40%, probably 20, 30% like that would be wrong. Yep. I find anyway. So because the the inbuilt version of the Record Box one is not as good as a dedicated piece of software. How somebody at Record Box hasn't just gone in and analysed and ripped off their software,
or bought them out,
or copied. Yeah, exactly. So there's that part of it. But yeah, so I do a lot of hotkeys and loops and stuff, which I'll do on the fly, just because I want to mix it that way, or I'll actually. For example, like a Beastie Boys track, and it's like, well, it's just queuing up half after the one or whatever, I'll just, while I'm at a bar gig, I do it sort of naturally, I'll actually shift and go, that's where the one should be, and I'll hit memory, and then I'll skip to the other memory point, which is the wrong one, and then I hit delete, and then I go back to that memory, and now, by default, that's the right start point, because the other memory point, which was wrong, has been deleted. Right? And it stores that as metadata to the file. Now, this is the trick. Is before I do a reboot on my USBs or whatever, I try and do it every few weeks or a month, sometimes it's a few months, is I plug my USB back into Record Box on the computer and I go update collection. And so it actually goes to the files on your computer, and all of that hotkey and, loop point and memory point, it puts it all back on the file. And that lives permanently on that file as long as you've got that version of Record Box, so I can then delete everything off that USB. So sometimes I'll pull up a record and go, I don't even think I've ever played this before. When did I put this on here? 5 years ago. And I'll load it up, and there's a bunch of hotkeys and loops. I'm like, oh, I have used it before. So, there's lots of different ways to sort of use it. So
while I'm picking your brain for Record Box, I lost my laptop that had all my music stored in it, but I've still got a SSD drive that I use to play out. Can I then take that and put it on a new computer, or do I need the original library?
That's a good... So you didn't save the Record Box library file?
I don't know. It's that fucking lacy fluoro orange thing over there, but I don't have the original computer, which I lost somewhere on Chapel Street.
Right, no. I would... Chapel Street. It's always Chapel Street's fault. That's a good one. I would. That's interesting. I think...
There if I was going to try, a workaround at some.
Well, the way I would do it is I would go to that drive. So as you know, it puts it all in these. This is cut this bit out.
Contents, it calls it. Yeah.
Contents, right? But it's all artist folders, right? So the way to pull everything out of that.
How?
And separate it from those folders is it's only going to be pretty much everything's going to be an MP3, a WAV, and an AIF, right? So you just go search on that, contents .mp3, and there's all your MP3s. So you grab all of those, stick them in a folder, then you go .aif, grab all the AIFs, chuck them in with the MP3s, .wav, chuck them all in there. That's pretty much all. You might have a couple of FLACs or whatever else. So now they're all sitting in a directory. You got your new computer with a new record box. You go add all this to your collection. You know,
which works for you because you don't like to put it into categories. But for me, I'm in all different genres.
No, but it doesn't matter. All those playlists and things that you do, you've still always got track. You know, your collection is still always in one thing. You know, if you just go to track on record box, doesn't matter if you've got a million playlists. It still all lives track. It's just everything.
Yeah.
So you've got all of that there. So it would be interesting.
I'm gonna have to give it a go.
Yeah, might be tricky. Something like that, because then I wonder like. So you've got your new computer with your new record box. It's got all the files there. But then I wonder if you take that old USB, that old drive then and plug it in and do update collection, it might be able to look at all of those and go, oh, you know, I want to update all of those bits of metadata as well. I feel like there'd be something in there that may not make it work, but what are you trying to get back? Are you just trying to get the music back?
I could just go through and just start again with the music, but it's...
Were you trying to get all the hotkeys and all that stuff or not?
The cue
you just want the music, man.
Yeah, the cue points would be good, but whatever, I have to start
just
again.
the music. You want the music back. Well, that works, what I just said. Just your MP3s, your waves, your apps, AIFs. Stick it in one folder, preferably on an external hard drive. Never change it. And you're back in business.
That's it, yeah. Start again.
Yeah, so like that's why I don't actually... you know, I back up everything on my computer. The one thing I don't back up is that music collection because I've always got dual copies of everything. So it's like, if that ever goes down, it's like, well, I've got 2 USBs, all of that sitting on there at all times. So, it took me a while to figure all this stuff out, but changed my friggin' life when I did. So.
It does feel good though to go into something that's well organized on a computer and know where things are. It feels like It
took me years to organize that stuff, but now that it's organized and I have a system, like if I told you what I do when I buy like 50 tracks, you know, before a weekend or something, if I said it to you, you'd be like, oh, dude, that sounds like so much work. It's 10 minutes. It's like, okay, I do this first, put that on. That takes 10 minutes to process through mixed and key, whatever. Chuck it in record box, let that analyze for that, go through, do this. And it seems like a lot of work, but because I built the system, it's like 8 jobs that I do in 15, 20 minutes, you know, once every 2 weeks. It's like, it's not that much.
Yeah, and that's good. You've got the process in place, and that's the thing, man. It's that you've got to be organised in that caper, otherwise you'll be out and you won't be able to find your music, and then the performance will suffer.
Yeah, true. I mean, I like that, but then I also love going out with nothing but 2 bags of records. That, you know, when I do vinyl nights at La La Land once a month, I literally just grab like, you know, an armful of records and don't even know what they are, and just think, I don't know what this is, you know, and just confuse myself, you know. So I like both ends of the spectrum, you know.
Yeah, having restraints can be fun as well, you know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Revolver, because we've talked about it a lot already, but you did just do your Revolver 20 gig in December last year.
Is this you trying to be professional now?
Yeah, it is. I'm
just saying because you said what a tag with thing. I appreciate it. I'm just saying so.
And that's also an album that you put out with some original remixes, original recordings, but also other songs as well. Tell us, first of all, about what it was like to DJ at the same venue for 20 years that's been Revolver, and then tell us about how that 20-year gig came about.
Playing somewhere for 20 years is... how to use... I know all the words to use, but I just overused words. I don't want to use the word blessing. I don't know, it always sounds a little trite, but it's the best way to sum it up. I mean, you know, to have a place like that, to have anywhere really, but, you know, a club that you enjoy playing in, you know, that you get to play to an audience, where the venue that you're working for, you know, truly values you and what you do. You know, they're not having you there because they want you to do a specific thing. I mean, having that is just incredible.
Amazing.
And then to have it for 5 years would be amazing, but to have it for 20 years is insane, you know. What were you going to say, sorry?
Oh, no, I wasn't going to cut you off, but I was just going to sort of give props to Revolver. Is even during that whole boom of commercial house music or whatever, it always stayed very true to the artistic integrity of the venue and never went down the path of any of these trends. It's always just had the people there that they believe were right for the job and never really tried to deviate from that at all, from my viewing, you know?
I think you're right. And to add to that, I would say that, and this is nothing to do with me, because there's some other long-term residents there who are more involved in the specific nights, who curate what also comes through. You know what I mean? Like I have no say in who comes in and does other things in there. Like if I wanted to do an occasional event, like as I just did for my Revs 20, of course I can do something like that, but that's not my job in there. It was like that for many years, and particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, I think they've done a really good job of sort of keeping us old guys around, you know, and respecting what we do and having us be a big part of it, but also ushering in young talent, particularly. And I think, and particularly like Saturday nights, DJ Ransom, you know, where the thing I always say is like, if you got a gig at Revolver, you got it from Ransom, or you got it from someone that got it from Ransom, you know. Just like whistling wheeze. I hope you can't hear that. I'm like, So, yeah, and I think particularly I notice with him at the Late Show on Saturdays, he's always sort of ushering in, you know, young talent as well. And, you know, because I think that's a great combination, is to have, you know, some of us that have been around for a long time, you know. And I think DJs, if you're on your game, you just get better as you get older. You know, it's like, what was that, the analogy of comedians, you know, like if a comedian's still going out like a week before he dies, it's like you've got so much life experience in your head, and that's where it comes from. You know, it's not, you're not like an athlete. Like no athlete's going to be at his prime at 85, really. Yep. Yeah, so I think Ransom and then the whole venue, that they've got a really good balance of keeping, you know, young, fresh sort of faces and talent sort of coming in. But yeah, keeping us open.
Henry's still involved?
Yeah, Henry still runs it. Yeah,
and he's done a great job
Henry's been there for 10 years. Yeah, I work closely with Henry with all kinds of things there, and Henry of course works with all of the heads of the other nights as well. So, and he's a great DJ. Henry who? Yeah.
So then, when you decided you wanted to celebrate your 20 years of being there, you thought, all right, I'm going to put together a night. I'm going to put together this album. We're calling it an album.
It is an album, yeah. It was a couple of ideas that sort of fell together. So there's three parts to it, which were, you know, doing an event, doing a retrospective album, and also doing a 4x4 meter poster wall collage. Revolver has this, they call it the poster wall, which is every month they have a different artist design something that goes up. You know, they sort of wallpaper it up. So you design an image. And so I'd just been, excuse me, burping. And I'm not, people can tell me I've got to stop saying this. I don't see myself as a visual artist at all. I just started making these, you know, silly little collages in the last sort of 10 years as record covers for my records, because I just got sick of, you know, paying people a couple of $100 to try and realize my ideas on computers. And actually one of the guys I used to pay, he was just like, mate, you should be doing this yourself. I'm like, I don't want to learn how to use Photoshop. And he was like, just do it on paper and take a photo of it. And I was like, I can do that? But I'm always sort of making these super sort of dense collages just because I enjoy it. And then they end up being a little JPEG, you know, this big. And so you really can't see any of the detail. It doesn't matter. I just enjoy making them. But I remember looking at the poster wall and going, well, I know the people who run that, so I'm pretty sure they give me a poster wall if they let me. I was like, I wonder if I could do one of my super dense collages and stick it on the poster wall. So that was one idea. Henry, who you just mentioned, and I were talking actually back in COVID about me doing a compilation record. I think we were going to call it Songs in the Key of Revolver or something like that. But, you know, COVID and all that stuff, it just never happened. So those ideas were floating around. And then I think about 18 months ago, it just crossed my mind. I was like, what would it look like if I ran my ultimate sort of 12-hour Revolver party? Like, you know, what would happen, who would play? And I just love the idea of pulling in, you know, all of my biggest influences, who are mainly, you know, the older heads at Revolver.
Like, who have you drop some names for us?
So Ransom and Boogs, they're kind of my two biggest influences. Both still Revolver resident DJs to this day. Spacey Space. Well, I'll go through the lineup. Luke McD, who's not a Revolver resident, but you know, big part of the place and was one of my big influences coming up. Jeanette, at Honey Smack playing live. We had Christopher Coe, Digital Primate. Who else am I missing? It's only been a month. Mike Calendar. I think that's most of us. Sorry, I know I'm missing one person. Yeah, and I just love that idea that I sort of pulled almost all of the heads, almost all of the long-term residents at Revolver Inn. We had Sunshine as well, but then the date got moved and we had to change some hours around, so I ended up not being able to put Sunshine on because we didn't have enough time to give her a spot that would have been
25 years
good enough for her. So, hey?
25 years she'll be there.
Exactly, yeah, 25 years she'll be there. So, so it all sort of fell together like that. It was like, but I stupidly, I saw it as this sort of cool three-pronged art project, the poster wall, the retrospective album, and doing a really cool event. And when the idea came together, and by the time I was looking at it, I didn't mean to do it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess if I'm doing that this year, I pitched it about 9 months ago, it's 20 years since I started my Sunday residency. I thought I missed my 20-year anniversary because I did 2 years on Thursdays beforehand. I'm like, I guess I could say it's my 20th anniversary of Sundays because it is, to the month pretty much. So that's what we did. But unfortunately, 6 weeks out from it, I realized that I saw it as this cool little art project, and about 6 weeks out, I was like, shit, this is all going to be about me, and everyone's going to be looking at me like it's my thing. I'm so stupid. I was just more involved in, everyone's going to go, what a cool party, what a cool album, what a cool wall, And of course, all anyone was saying is hey, man, 20 years, awesome. I was like, what?
You'd invented your own birthday.
Yeah. So it was a little bit it was but it was overwhelming in a good way. The amount of, love and respect that I got from it was, the whole thing almost sort of washed over me. So I was not expecting how much sort of loveliness and, people being kind and saying nice things. And so, yeah, it was fantastic. But it reminded me why I don't really have birthday parties or throw parties anymore.
You don't want to be the center of attention.
No, I don't. I want to be one of the cogs in the machine, So.
And the poster wall, putting it up in a 10 by 10 or however big the foot, what is it, about 3 meters by 3 meters?
Yeah, 3.5 by 4 meters, something like that. So, yeah.
And doing that in the collage form, was that fun as well?
Well, it's funny. I was saying that I got into artwork from not doing Photoshop, but I realized that the way, because it was really just like a stack of digital images that I collected over the years. So everything from going back, I've got a stash of shoeboxes of every flyer, when we did physical flyers that I've ever made for Revolver shows. So photographing old stuff like that. I photographed a bunch of sort of bits of the venue, bits of wall like you've got behind here. I sort of made that the backdrop, and then all these images sort of loaded on top. But I actually did do it in Photoshop because it was the only way it was going to kind of look good on the wall.
Yeah.
So that was a absolute nightmare because when you do something of that scale, apparently it's tougher on your computer than doing any of this stuff. So I had a crash course in Photoshop, and which I rented for about 8 weeks to get it done. Shout out to Ben Silver6 who helped me through that morass. So that was sort of hellish, but then when it was done and it was there, it was hey, this is pretty cool. So.
And now that you're happy with the whole way everything turned out, and you've also got the album which you've put out as well, which is, I guess, similar to the wall, but it's musical instead of visual.
Oh, I like that comparison, yeah. And yeah, I did use that collage that I did became, the promotional artwork for the show and the front cover of the album and stuff as well. So yeah, T-Rek Revs 20 on all your streaming services now. Yeah, nice. So original tracks of mine, all tracks. Well, most club things that I've made in the last 20 years have been, tested and focused towards the Revolver dance floor because that's always been my testing ground for everything. So yeah, original tracks. Co-written tracks with other producers like Mike Callender and Spacey Space and people like that, and then remixes I've done for other people. Actually, I was telling you before we did this, licensed back a Snoop Dogg and Coolio remix that I did about 20 years ago, and so a bunch of remixes and different things like that. And but I actually left most of my big famous, they're not famous, my bigger tracks I left off because I kept, it's 2.5 hours, and I kept sort of re-sequencing it and listening to it for a few months as I was putting it together, and the big woohoo kind of tracks just didn't fit in there. So I tried to sort of pick the more sort of interesting, slightly more esoteric ones. But I am actually going to do another compilation this year, which is just going to be all the bangers.
T-Rek brings the bangers.
Yeah.
Have you got a title for it?
I do.
You don't want to tell us?
I like the way it looks. It sounds stupid. It's no, it's
tell me after.
FKNBNGRZ M8.
Okay.
which, if you look at it, it says, fucking bangers, mate.
Yeah. I like it. All stylized in uppercase letters.
Probably. I'm gonna do one of my shitty graffiti painting type things for it, but it's a title that made me laugh. I think I wrote it to someone once and they went, "That's funny." So
yeah. I think when we're talking about the old CD wallets, I think I had a few CDs called like fucking bangers.
There you go, right?
Yeah, it's one of those. That should be the artwork, just like an old CD with just scribbled on it.
Yes, that's a good idea. It could be that. So
fucking bangers. And also you've obviously mentioned you've been DJing there for 20 years, but what is it like on a I'm guessing you're going to work a lot of the time and it's sunrise, it's early, and that's obviously very different to how most people go to work. Do you find that enjoying? Does it get tedious? Does it become hard work? Is it some days do you think, fuck, I'd rather just walk the dog and have a coffee and take it easy?
there's a mental game that I play every week with it. Yeah, I mean, I've been there for 20 years on Sundays, but it's only been the last 7 years that I've been doing. So I'm the last DJ at Revolver every week, pretty much. So I play on Monday morning, which is I start anywhere from sort of 3 to 5 on Monday morning till whenever we close. So the first 15 years I wasn't doing that. It was a bit easier. Yeah, it's a bit of a mental game I play. I sort of have this weird sleeping pattern where I reset my sleeping at the start of the week, and as the week progresses, I stay up later and wake up later until I basically try and wake up as late as possible on a Sunday afternoon, so I can then sort of push right through until Monday morning whenever I finish. And yeah, it's funny. I've been doing it for years, but it's still this mental thing. It's pretty much every week through the night in that 4 or 5 hours before I go in, I'm like just mildly sort of tortured and thinking, I don't want to do this. What am I doing? This is horrible. I'm so not in the mood this week and all this stuff. And it's just part of, I see that as, I think when you've been playing and performing as long as I have, it's nervousness sort of takes different forms. So I think it's almost like a nerves thing. I don't feel nervous or anxious, or actually it's definitely an anxious thing to it. But it happens every week and I'm almost resentful by the time I'm going in there. But as soon as I get in there and I see my friends who work there and I see the crowd and I start playing music that I love and I, throw back a couple of tequilas, it's always within 20 minutes, I'm like, I've got the best job in the world. What the hell was I worried about? But you would think you'd learn from that and then the next week would be easier. It doesn't happen. I just go through the same thing every week. Yeah. But I just see it as part of the process. But I also know it's because I care a lot about it. Like I genuinely go in there every week trying to, it might sound trite, but like trying to play the best set I've ever played, And I'm lucky enough that, I get maybe 2 to 6 times a year. I feel like that's the best set I've ever played anywhere. Yeah. Yeah, I'm always aiming for that, and I take it really seriously in a good way. Like I'm very serious about being stupid.
Is there times where you've got a 5 a.m. start and you sleep and then wake up at 4 or anything?
Oh, occasionally I have like a little nap for a couple of hours. Yeah, if I happen to be up early on a Sunday, but I'm a real night owl anyway, so. I've always had like a really weird sort of, I used to have insomnia for years until I've struggled with it right up until the last few years where I sort of realized with working with a good doctor that it's like, most people that have insomnia are trying to correct and, regulate their sleeping pattern. I don't need a regular sleeping pattern and I don't want one. I just need to kind of hit a reset button every week. Mm-hmm. And I've sort of figured out how to do that. So,
and that's during the week you just...
Monday night, yeah. So I generally like sleep, Monday till the afternoon or even till the early evening if, depending how late I'm at Revolver working. And I get up for a few hours and then, just basically, I don't know why I'm avoiding it like it's something terrible, but I just have a prescription of a sleeping pill that I take once a week on a Monday night at like, midnight, and it knocks me out and I wake up at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning ready to go. Like,
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But for years it was kind of a nightmare, because if I didn't have that, I'd be up all Monday night and then you're trying to get up on no sleep on Tuesday and you feel behind the 8 ball for the whole week. So yeah, it only took 20 years to figure it out.
It does say a lot about how strong Melbourne's
drugs are. Sorry.
No, but club scene is because you guys might finish at whatever time on Monday and then people can go to the breakfast club, which is probably happening somewhere as well. Yeah. And the party, people can literally...
Of course, I never go there and keep drinking.
Well, but I'm sure that people can, and do go out for multiple days on end because you can do that in Melbourne. Monday morning isn't the end of it.
No. And of course, I never do that either. Shout out to the Breakfast Club, my friends there.
I've been trying to get Ethan on here since the start, man.
Oh, really?
Because I've known him for a long time, but yeah, he hasn't really got back to me about it.
Oh, okay. He's probably still at Breakfast Club.
I'll keep trying. Where else have we got? Oh, the radio show. You haven't talked about that yet.
Oh, yeah. I've been doing that for, I think it's 5 years next month, actually. Saturday afternoons on Kiss FM, 3 until 4:30 p.m.
Where's the Kiss studio now?
Sydney Road in Brunswick.
Oh, it's still, because it was where Rubik's was. Is it still, it's moved now?
Hasn't been there. Yeah, it's been in the same place since I've been doing it which is, just, I started the month before COVID, so.
Yep.
Which was like a really happy coincidence. I think it was maybe a few months beforehand, I went in and did a guest spot on the show. I used to do some guest spots at Kiss FM going back almost 20 years. So I kind of knew Timmy Byrne, who runs the station. Shout out to Kiss FM, Timmy Byrne and Kate. And I went and did this spot, and it was nice to see Timmy again. He was like, come and have a chat afterwards. And I was like, he's going to ask me if I want to do a show. And I'd actually been flirting with the idea of doing a radio show. I'd even done a couple of demos, actually. But it was more a rock thing. I was thinking I might put it on my SoundCloud. He said, what do you think about doing a show? And I said, yeah, I'd like to. But I think he only had it was like, I don't know, something like 4 a.m. on a Tuesday morning or something like that. And I sort of said, look, if I'm going to do it, I wouldn't mind having a decent time slot. Like, let me know when something opens up. A few months later, he's like, I've got Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. I'm like, that sounds good. Let's do it. Happened to be like a week or two before COVID. So that was a cool thing. When COVID hit, I still had one gig. But it actually really changed me as a DJ, because my main gig was, doing the radio show every week, and you're not trying to sustain the vibe of a room or hold a dance floor. I was like, I can literally play whatever the hell I want. Like all of the silly kind of going from this to that you would think might be kind of fun in your head, but you would never do because it just would be inappropriate. It's like, I can do that on the radio. And it really affected me in a really great way when I went back out to work after COVID. I sort of took that energy with me. I didn't start just doing that randomly. But so yeah, the Kiss FM show's has been great to sort of do that. I don't actually do it out of the studio. I pre-record about 3 or 4 hours before it goes out and upload it. So I just don't have time to drive all the way across town every week. So
and they've also got Denon CD players.
No, they haven't. They've got they got the Pioneer. That was a thing at one point. Timmy's like, you should come in and do it sometimes. I'm like, I'm not working on those things.
I've seen the photos and I'm like, I've never seen them.
No, they got Pioneers in there in the last 18 months or so or something. So yeah. No, it's much better now.
It's much better. And you're going to continue to do that for the foreseeable future? That is like just more radio stuff is on the cards?
Yeah.
Because realistically, not having a go at you, but can you, how long, as you get older, can you keep doing those early gigs, Like it takes its toll on people,
Well, it's only one. It's just Revolver. That's the only one that I do that. Like all my other gigs are, how do I do this without making it sound like my own personal gig guide? I do Wednesday nights at La La Land, and I do sort of different bars and stuff. Friday, Saturday nights, it sort of mixes up. Lots of places where I'll do like one spot a month.
Yeah.
And I am about to start doing Thursday nights at Holy Grail, which is a rock and roll gig, which I've never had a residency doing rock and roll, which would be fun. And then Revolver is the late night, the Sunday morning one. So it's yeah, I don't see any reason to stop doing it. Like I'm more driven and inspired to do it than I ever have been. Like partly because of all that record box stuff we were talking about, like having amassed this collection and feeding it. It's just like, you know what it's like? You can have like thousands of songs in USB, but you just throw 50 new ones in and it kind of reframes everything you already had in there. Mm-hmm. So I got a few years of me yet. I ain't going nowhere. So
there are people that have been doing it for quite a long period. When you're talking about commercial DJs working in Melbourne, there's some people that have got a fair few years on yourself, though.
Yes, there is, and I'm always inspired to see them. There's people like Gavin Campbell. Even the people close to me, like I mentioned before, Boogs and Spacey. Boogs is about a year older than me. Spacey's 3 or 4 years older than me.
I've got to reach out to Gav and get him on because his story is super interesting.
It is.
And
I believe he's written a book about it, actually. So
yeah, I've got to get Gav on. I've done a few parties with Gav and DJed with him over the years, and yeah, man, he's from where he started to where the club scene is now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. So he's yeah, and I've only really gotten to know Gav properly in the last couple of years, actually, just through a mutual gig that we do. But yeah, like so, I've always got, and Ransom as well. Like looking at those guys around me and thinking, well, they're all still. Jeanette, she's another one. I mean, that was the funny thing of the T-Rek Revs 20 thing. We did that, so everyone was doing 1 hour sets except for me. Show off. So it was 10 DJs. I'm 48. I was the second youngest DJ on the bill.
Wow.
Mike Callender was the only one who was younger than me. Like everyone else is older than me. And, that's a hell of a lineup. Like, Jeanette, Ransom, Chris Coase, like most of these people are in their 50s and they're, Jan's playing better than she ever was, so
Yeah.
it's good to see.
Age is only a number, man.
So they tell me.
But the mental battle, I guess, would be getting harder, and just sort of knowing that you're going to be out later, and you got to as time progresses, I would imagine it becomes harder for a lot of people. Just
For a lot of people, it probably would, yeah. But I've always sort of lived in this world, like playing in bands and all that kind of stuff as well. So I haven't done the whole.
You haven't grown up yet.
No. Marriage and kids and mortgage and all that kind of stuff. I mean, not that I didn't want those things, but my life's just sort of. Yeah, it's always primarily I've just sort of wanted to live off music. Like I never really made a choice. It was like I just sort of fell into this and just run at stuff, and this is the life that's unfolded, and it's pretty damn fun. It's tough at times, and it's had some really challenging years, but it just never the thought of genuinely walking away from it. Like it's like to do what?
Have a corporate job? No way.
Yeah, who's going to employ me in a corporate job? To do what? I'm unqualified to do anything but this. So.
Yeah, well, that's it, man. I think a lot of creative people are like that, and it's daunting to think if I had to get a real job, what would I actually do? Yeah,
I looked into it a couple. Even through COVID, I was doing a bit of I don't know what the catch-all is, but like landscape gardening or something. I don't know. Like, I called myself a lumberjack because I was chopping down trees and turning them into firewood. And I sort of thought I was really struggling for a few years to get gigs before that because I got into a funny spot in the industry. I had that big success and these really big records. I was doing huge gigs for a lot of money and traveling around Australia every weekend. But I wasn't really a good fit for that commercial end of the industry, so I didn't pursue it and it quietly went away. But most people then saw me as too much of a big deal to sort of offer me the more kind of, small club gigs and bars and stuff that I used to get. So
the ones that just make you tick over.
Yeah, so like no one was offering me gigs anymore because I, wasn't pursuing the commercial end and everyone thought I was too much of a big deal for the smaller stuff. So when, COVID hit and, I was doing that kind of work, it was like, oh, maybe this is where I'm going. Maybe I'm going to chop down trees. And I don't mind working hard, but, as COVID sort of went away and gigs picked up, it was like, well, I do enjoy working hard and chopping down trees and stuff, but I mean, DJing pays a hell of a lot better, and it's not sort of tough on them. That was the time. See, that was the other thing. Is like at what was I then? Like at 45, is this really when I'm going to start like doing hard physical labor? Like, don't know. This is going to be great on the old bod in another 5 years, but I did get fit a bit.
Yeah, the same thing, man. I haven't had a real job working for someone else for 15 years or so. And
That's great, isn't it?
Well, it's good. But,
I mean, you and I are working.
Times.
We're working right now.
Yeah, we are. But I want to refinance my house, and I was looking the other day at like, okay.
What does that mean?
Sorry, I need to do that. And I'm going to need to get a real job for a while. And I looked and I'm like, I've got no idea even where to fucking begin, man.
Oh, there you go.
It's scary.
No, I'm going to stick with this stuff, mate. You got a record collection up there. You got a nice little studio.
Start selling things off one by one.
That's it.
Do you want to tell us what else is coming up in 2025? You've hinted at a few things, but as we get closer to wrapping it up, man, do you want to tell us what people can expect from T-Rek in the future?
That's a very good point. Well, I mean, I haven't talked a lot about it here, but I still do a lot of live music. I'm playing in a couple of bands at the moment. I did mention Honey Smack, who I think you said it's coming up next week or something?
Or in Feb.
In Feb. Yeah, because I think he's off to NAM.
He's when he gets back from overseas.
Yeah. And that's not Vietnam or NAM. It's the NAM show.
Yeah, that's like the music, what's it called?
Yeah, what does NAM stand for?
Conference. It's, I don't know.
National.
National. I don't know. But it's the conference where people look at new technology.
Yeah, music and stuff. I'm playing drums for a band called the Dukes of Deliciousness, who are an awesome, who are sort of Geelong-based rock and roll band. I think they were around for about 5 or 6 years. Stopped for about 7 years, and I've gotten back together with me on drums, and so we're doing shows. I have a band with Honey Smack called Dumb Machine Music, and I was up until the last couple of years doing a lot. I go out and play guitar and sing either by myself, sometimes with a small ensemble or as a duo. And I'm just about to get back into that. I've just been too busy playing drums and DJing for the last couple of years. And I have this a ridiculous amount of music, most of it which is like finished to the point of mixed and mastered, which I did through COVID, which I just haven't had time to put out in the world. So my plan is to try and dump a lot of recorded music out into the world under my own name. I put that stuff out, Tarek Smallman, as well as there's a lot of T-Rek stuff which is just not on streaming and stuff. Like all the Ministry of Sound stuff I took back, when the licenses expired.
So that's only for a period of time they have that license for?
Yeah, they can renew it. You can just leave it with them. They don't just take it down when the license expires, but once you've... it's like, they were like 7-year terms, I think. So after that 7 years... once they've recouped any expenses and stuff, like they'll just keep it out there and keep selling it for you.
Do the royalties keep ticking over if they're on their playlist though?
People are streaming it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but I took all of that stuff back years ago, and I'm still trying to put it back out. It's laborious. Like sometimes you got to regenerate the artwork or find the old artwork. Some of it's like, I'm going to remaster that. Am I going to put that one on there? Now with streaming, you got to do 2 separate edits: one for Spotify, one for streaming, one for DJ Beatport type things. So it's just time, laborious, and then you got to spend half an hour doing the Excel spreadsheet for it. So, I really just want to pump out a lot of music and as much new stuff as old stuff, and keep playing drums and come and see my new rock and roll night if you're in Chapel Street on a Thursday night. Hopefully, there's been no real rock and roll, band or otherwise in Chapel Street for a long time, and I've always lived around there, and there used to be a lot of rock and roll in Chapel Street. So
it did. Come
and have a drink and this is the other thing. I can say this because I'm not even working there yet, but I think Holy Grail is the best bar in Melbourne because you can sit at the bar and smoke. And Thursday nights, hopefully, I'll be blasting rock and roll in there. So
for sure, man. There used to be. I used to do it once a month, but Cock Rock at the Lucky Cock that Wednesday night. They used to do.
That's the one I was just talking to you about outside. Yeah.
But you were saying bimbos, but that was at.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was at the Cock. Yeah,
I get them mixed up. Yeah, sorry. Because they were the same owners.
They were different now. It's all changed. But Cock Rock used to be Wednesday nights there.
That's the one I was talking about.
I think I would have done that with you.
That's the one I was saying. I reckon we crossed paths.
But you said bimbos, and we all got confused.
But you're supposed to listen to what I mean, not what I say. All of you.
All right, T-Rek, I appreciate you coming in, man. It's been an awesome chat, and I really look forward to you coming back again, and we can talk about where you're at later on in this year, hopefully.
I'd love to do that. That'd be awesome. Thanks so much for having me. This space is cool. Break in here and hang out. It's cool. No, don't do that.
Or do you want to shout out anybody before we wrap it up?
Shout out. Who would I shout out? I've been shouting out people the whole time. I shout out Kiss FM. Like
very true.
All my friends at the Chapel Street bars that come and see me, and everyone at Revolver, and everyone to help make Revs 20 awesome, and Cherry Bar as well. I've been doing a lot with Cherry Bar again recently, doing some rock and roll stuff with them. I got to I got to put together a band of some of the guys from Red Rose band, and I put together a band for Jesse Hughes from Eagles of Death Metal just before Christmas, and did a show with him. So that was a wild time. So yeah, everyone at all the venues that I love, thanks for continuing to pay me to do cool stuff, man.
And not grow up.
I'll come back to report on myself getting younger in 6 months.
T-Rek, I appreciate the chat, man. Now let's look through some records, shall we?
Hell yeah, let's do that.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.